Hello, I'm going to open this regular meeting of the Blue Lake City Council to order. It's Tuesday, February 27th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Our first order of business, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, could we have an establishment of the quorum, please?
Mayor Jones,
Here.
Mayor Potential,
Present.
Member McKay.
Here.
Here.
Okay, we have one member absent. And we'll move on to approval of the agenda. First at council, is there anyone that would like to move anything around or see the need to change anything from the agenda as delivered?
Nothing here.
Okay. And open to public. Anyone from the public here for something specific? Okay, we'll move back to the council for a motion and a vote.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Angela Shull, seconded by Christopher Edgar to approve the agenda as delivered. And note that Councilperson Elise Scafani just came in. Is there any further discussion about the agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Item 3 is our public comment time. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the City Council that is relevant to the scope of authority of the City of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. The Council may provide up to 15 minutes for this public input session. To assure that each individual presentation is heard, the Council may uniformly impose time limitations of 3 minutes to each individual presentation. The public will be given the opportunity to address items that are on the agenda at the time the council takes up each specific agenda item. Is there anyone here for public comment? Mr. Kent Sawatsky.
Someone on Zoom too.
So during the recent flood we had, or it must be about a month ago now, it was asserted that the city wasn't notified as far as weather conditions. I have copies of those, don't unfortunately have them with me, to show that it was a standard process where everybody was notified. I also reached out to the tribe, our rancher, we have partners, they were notified. And I also got the notification of this upcoming storm. So I'm on the list now as far as being notified. So
Mr.
there-
Swatsky, I apologize for interrupting. Isn't this agenda item 6? The flood?
no, you can apologize. I'm speaking about the OAS service for Humboldt County in history. About that particular topic, the OAS isn't on there. So anyway, I do have those things coming now, and I'm sure you can get on the list if you are interested in getting on a list to be informed as far as this upcoming weather situation which we're going into. I strongly suggest that we all do that. I also have a public records request, which I will be giving to Onley here because I possibly has not received it. So I'm going to read it to you. Okay, so you have it. This is in reply to a letter I got from the city attorney, Ryan Plotz. And what's the noise? Is that time up or something? But basically a public records request. Mr. Plotz, regarding the assertion that I made certain statements during public comment that constitute threats towards city employees, there's a formal PA request for the city any record the city may have regarding this said assertion, including but not limited to notes taken, staff communication, commission communication, and statements that have been reported to the Humboldt County Sheriff, including any post reporting communication. Allegedly, you folks were sent a CC of the letter that was sent from me. The letter I got from the attorney was not delivered special, just regular post, and it said you all were CC'd with the complaint to that, including the city manager, the city clerk, and the city council. So you should be aware of that particular topic. And so I'm going to, at this time, since I'm not sure, I have no indication that my request to have this forward to the city has been forward, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop it off right now. So Always appreciate when not only does respond promptly, you have a very good city clerk. She takes care of her due diligence on PIO requests, and it's something the public values greatly. Thank you.
Okay, I see someone on
It's
Zoom.
Julie Christie.
Julie Christie.
Are you guys able to hear me okay tonight?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you guys for Zoom. Justin, if you remember, thank you for being supporting for us. I was gonna just request extend that commissions could also be offered the opportunity of Zoom. I think we have, good participants this evening on our council, and that's great. It allows a lot more public, access to being involved, and it also allows recording opportunities for archiving our commission meetings. I'm really happy that the commission is allowing and participation in their commission. But I would probably again like to help support from our council and staff to try and work into that. I know we still have a little bit of COVID funds that we're going to be at one point distributed towards that direction or towards helping Justin. So either or, much appreciated. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. No other hands up on Zoom. No one from the audience. Great. So we'll move on to item 4. Blue Lake Commissioner Application Review and Appointments. The city has received applications from the following applicants for appointments to various city commissions. The following applicants are existing commissioners whose terms have expired and who are requesting reappointment. And we have their applications in our packets. For the Economic Development Commission, we have Cindy Trobitz Thomas and Kelly Costa. For Public Safety Commission, we have Kim Warvey and Stephanie Dickinson. And for Parks and Recreation Commission, we have Bettina Piper. And again, it's always wonderful to have these qualified people step forward again and to continue the good work that they do on those commissions. Are there any questions or comments from
thrilled.
council?
Didn't we already appoint Kim Warvey?
That's what I'm
She
wondering.
took over a person who left.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
she
right.
was in the
Okay.
middle of a
That's
term
right.
and it was a
That
short
that
term.
short
So,
Okay.
2-month
right.
program. That's right.
These
Thank you.
things happen.
Okay, good. I was like,
I would like to move that we appoint.
I was
all-
going to open it up to the public before
Sorry.
we make a motion. Is there any comment from public concerning these commissions and commissioners? The mayor recognizes Kent Sawatsky.
I did want to thank the people for reapplying. It's always hard to get people, and we're lucky to have these people participating in this. We don't want to lose the ones we have. I did have something on certain qualifications on some of these committees that I run into. There is a necessity of a person or a certain percentage of these people actually being residents of Blue Lake. And I think that varies. It'd really be nice to get clarity on that. So how many residents are required in your application? Of course, you do have the right to go ahead and delete certain information about the person. But here it says one of them, I'm just looking at one of them here, length of time in Blue Lake, 18 years managing family property. That person lives in the Fieldbrook area. And so it's hard to tell whether somebody's qualified. And the other one in here, I know another person, another great person in here, mentioned that they've been in around the area for a length of time in Blue Lake, 38 years. And that one sounds like it's probably in Blue Lake. On the other one here, there's a person who says length of time in Blue Lake, 65 plus years, and I don't believe that person actually resides within the city limits. So I'm just saying maybe that question needs to be clarified as far as length of time residing in Blue Lake itself or something, so that we can tell, or else don't redact the other parts, show their address so we do know they live in the city. That's just a question. That's something I think you're going to need to follow up on some of your things. You may wish to have your staff address that to make sure what the criteria are, what your ratios are. And then again, I mentioned before, you did downsize your arts and heritage. You have four vacancies coming at the same time, and one position is vacant. So it'd be really good to go ahead and declare that one to be the vacant one to be in sequence. So you have 2 and 3 rather than having 4 coming all due at one time. I think that's a process we've tried to have before. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thanks for the people who are continuing to serve.
And I see on Zoom, Julie. Yeah.
Curious if, now that our applicants are reapplying, they're applying, should in kind of outlining the position and vacancies, I think that's always great to have that in the public eye. That I call, and look ask what they're about, ask questions, and move on from there, so that, the application, doesn't come there, will be involved. But just giving leadership there to ask them to stand and see what it is about. I think that we can break the ice with a lot of our students, so confident and start being involved. Thank you.
That's a good idea.
Okay, any other comments from the public? Back to council. Mandy, I think that's an interesting idea that this length of time living and well, one says living and working in Blue Lake, and the other says living. And I know, for instance, Cindy Trobitz Thomas has not lived in the city of Blue Lake.
Here though.
Uh-huh. So maybe it should say length of time in Blue Lake area or something like that. I mean,
We've
And that's
we've
true of Pelican
discussed it
Costa as well,
before
right?
too.
Also.
Um,
Like, too.
Okay. Yeah.
Place, but there are different factors for it.
yeah.
we've talked about before is if there is a resident who is as qualified as another commissioner, we'd vote the resident in rather than the other person.
Right.
We've talked about that.
Right.
But
And
that,
so, but if they live in the sphere of influence, like she was saying, I think and nobody else is coming in, I don't think it hurts anything.
Yeah, it's just that the actual wording, length of time in Blue Lake,
Oh,
it
okay.
should mean in the city of Blue Lake.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that we should give priority to
Yeah.
folks that live in Blue Lake, but this is misleading, I think, for some people. But this happens often when people say, "Oh, I live in Blue Lake," and then you find out, "Oh, I live over by Murphy's Market" or something like that. Technically, you don't live in Blue Lake, so it's used very fluidly. But anyway, it might be something to look at in the future, so we can really have a more accurate application.
well, I agree that, we probably should, do that. Because I understand what Chris is saying, but that kind of doesn't apply when we have people coming on the commission at different times. If we have like everybody applying at the same time, then
Right.
we would give preference to the resident. But what may happen if we have one person coming at a time, we might have a commission that's just about full of people that don't actually live within the city limits. And then, so then we don't have that opportunity to balance it. So, and I noticed there are two different formatted applications here, and they say different things. So we should probably be sure that what's on the website that people can print out and what we're handing people are the very same
Yep.
application. So we have the same information from everyone. And as Adeline was saying, have a situation, have a question that says, do you live within the city limits? Yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you work within the city limits? Yes or no? And then how long? That way we know exactly, and the public knows exactly what we're looking at.
I agree.
That makes sense.
And then there is that question on the expiration of term for the Arts and Heritage Commissioners. And so what Kent mentioned is true. I think it said so. There's four people, terming out at the same time, and one person terming out at a different year, and that is partially the result of how the website was updated. When I think how it happened that we had spots filled and then we removed two spots when it went from a 7 to a 5-year or a 5-member commission. So one of those terms that expires is probably not supposed to. I have to look at it to see who's who, but I think we could probably change one of those dates, so that because it could be an error, so that we don't actually have four terming out at the same time. We have 3 terming out at that date and 2
Right.
more at the other.
Okay, we'll look at that. That's good. We'll have staff look at the Arts and Heritage Commission and see how we're doing on those commissioners. Okay, back to the issue at hand. We need a motion and a second to approve this slate of commissioners.
I would make a motion that we approve all the applicants.
Second.
Motion made by Elise Scafani, seconded by Elizabeth
Elizabeth.
McKay. Any further discussion from council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes. And again, thank you to those folks that have stepped up to work on our city issues. We are now on item 5. Conduct the second reading and adopt by title only an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Blue Lake, adding section 6.04.035 to chapter 6.04 of Title 6 of the Blue Lake Municipal Code to adopt dog leash regulations and determining the ordinance to be exempt from CEQA. Discussion and action items. So the City Council directed staff to amend this chapter. So noted, as this item amends the city municipal code, it must be adopted through the ordinance adoption process. This requires a first and second reading prior to adoption at a regularly scheduled council meeting. The city council introduced and conducted the first reading of the ordinance at the January 23rd meeting. So this second reading and adoption is recommended to occur this evening. And again, this has to be a roll call vote. We need to know exactly who votes and who doesn't. So is there any questions or comments or discussion from council on this item? No. No? We've been working on it a long time. We finally got the legal terms that we
Mhm.
needed to make it a real ordinance. Okay, I'll open it up for public input on this. The chair recognizes Kent Sawatsky.
I'm so glad to see this coming to fruition. I will reiterate what I did before. It's really nice to have a ordinance and something, and now we're left with enforcement. And I will reiterate, some time of enforcement needs to be available. I mean, laws are great, but if nobody is able or willing to enforce them, that gets to be a problem. I still will again continue to lobby to have you request staff to bring back current prices from the animal shelter as far as having a regular patrol going through the area, which would be checking for licensing. And I think if you get enough dogs licensed through this particular effort, hopefully would pay for that, and we will all feel a lot safer knowing that we have actual people who are qualified and licensed and trained to handle dogs in these kind of situations. Just going up and down the street and just coming up upon a dog that's off leash running around town, it's something that most people would not be comfortable going with, trying to apprehend or deal with that dog unless you know the dog. And it's just good to have professionals out there. So I highly recommend we go down that path. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this? Julie on Zoom.
Oh my God, it's been fantastic tonight, but give comment. One more time, I was gonna speak this, but I think it's really have to you guys, it's kind of in town, just kind of marking around the areas that are.
We're having trouble. We're having a little trouble hearing you. Could you speak a little louder?
Let me turn it up.
That's now.
A little.
Just sign, you guys, just get some time town marking where it's limit. Well, I've said it a few times, I just think we should get that in there too, that's all, I support all of this, thank you.
Okay, back to council for any further discussion or
Make
clarification.
a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Winona.
I just wanted to thank everyone for the leash law coming to fruition as well. It was a long process, a lot of talking, a lot of back and forths. And to the Public Safety Commission as well, because Phil and Stephanie, I think, kind of went above and beyond trying to help out. And Handsome just turned 18. And, just thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go ahead and just read the amendments so we're all clear about it. Item A says it shall be unlawful for any owner of or person in charge of or in control of any dog to suffer or permit a dog to be in the city unless such dog is securely enclosed in a pen, a fenced yard or other enclosure, or securely tethered or on a leash. And then B, no person having the control or care of any dog shall suffer or permit such dog to enter or remain in a public park or recreation area unless it is led by a leash of suitable strength not more than 6 feet in length. However, nothing in this section shall prevent a dog from being used without a leash to lawfully hunt wild birds or game, or to herd, guard, gather, or otherwise work domestic animals or fowls in or upon a public place or premise. Says, so long as such dog is under the charge and control of a person competent to keep such dog under effective charge and control, and so long as such dog does not wrongfully harm or damage or threaten to harm or damage any person or public or private property. In addition, nothing in this chapter shall prevent a dog from running without a leash in any area designated as a dog run or park by the city, so long as such dog is under the charge and control of a person competent to keep such dog under effective charge and control, and so long as such dog does not wrongfully harm or damage or threaten to harm or damage any person or public or private property. This section, item C, is this section shall not apply to any official law enforcement dogs on patrol. Okay, so what we need is a motion for the second reading and adoption of ordinance. And you'll have to give the ordinance
So moved.
number.
I have to give the number?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Elizabeth McKay, seconded by Christopher Edgar, to conduct the second reading and adopt by title only. You have to say by title only, or I'd have to read the whole thing, which I almost did, but an ordinance of the City Council of City of Blue Lake adding section 6.04.035 to chapter 6.04 of Title 6 of the Blue Lake Municipal Code to adopt dog leash regulations and determining the ordinance to be exempt from CEQA. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we need a roll call vote on an ordinance. Yes.
Pro Tem Schiffel,
Yes.
Councilmember McKay,
Yes.
Councilmember Fun,
Yes.
Councilmember Edgar.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. All right, we are now on item 6, City of Blue Lake, January 2024 flood event discussion. City Council member Scafani has requested that a discussion item be added to the agenda regarding the flood event experienced in January of 2024. Staff is available to provide information on the event, along with information on future planning, etc. City staff presented an after-action report to the Blue Lake Public Safety Commission at the February meeting regarding the flood event. Several community members that were affected by the flooding were in attendance and provided feedback on the event itself, as well as ideas for future impacts.
Do we have access to those ideas? From that other.
I don't know. I don't.
I could provide an overview.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell us what happened at the meeting?
I'm sure. I mean, it's Councilmember Scavani's items. I don't know if you wanted to open it differently
You wanna
or
talk about it? Or-
No, I don't have anything. I just thought we should that all of the council should be aware of whatever information is out there.
Sure. Okay. So at the Public Safety Commission meeting, we did an after action report on the flood in 2024. There was a lot of good input. We had several representatives from areas and specific households that were directly impacted by the flood event. Lynn Glenn is here tonight. She was, she lives right adjacent to Powers Creek, and they experienced quite a bit of of flooding on their property. We had flooding along Broderick and the Horse Arena, and then just at various locations, Hatchery Road. And then obviously we took a lot of water off of the new state culvert that was installed that overwhelmed a private culvert and then overwhelmed the county culvert and caused quite a bit of stormwater to come into the city. That is something that's um, absolutely abnormal. Wasn't something that we had planned for or had actually even anticipated. It was it caused quite a bit of havoc on our stormwater system and exacerbated flooding that for us would probably be not necessarily normal, but something that we've experienced in the past. That flooding levels were definitely exacerbated by the amount of water that we received coming off of Greenwood. At one point, if anyone kind of saw Greenwood, at one point it looked like a creek was flowing down Greenwood, and then that came into our stormwater system, which exits out at the Horse Arena and goes out to the creek, which had already obviously was experiencing a high flow event. Some of the things that we talked about that we would do differently in the future, we ran out of sandbags early on. The sandbag situation was exacerbated because the sandbags that the city did have stockpiled basically all went up to the county property because there was so much flooding going on up there that most of our resources went up to Blake Boulevard to try and alleviate the flooding that was going on and trying to redirect the water back into the county culvert and alleviate flooding that was coming into the Shepherd's property. So it was a great use of the resources, but it quickly took away resources that we could have used in town. So we had quite a few sandbags on hand, but those were quickly depleted based upon just the severity of what was happening on the county side of the boulevard. So obviously we're happy to put the resources up there. We had staff working up there. We had the fire department working up there. Our city engineer was up there. Um, but that did deplete our sandbag resources. We were able to find sandbags at Pearson's. We went all around Arcata and McKinleyville, but at that point, everyone was buying sandbags. But we now have a pretty good stockpile, and we have our stockpile of sand that's available at City Hall. It's still out there now. We are supposed to get some substantial weather this week, Thursday through Saturday. Um, the biggest part of that event will be snow and wind. There will be quite a bit of precipitation, but it's not anticipated to invoke any flooding concerns. Um, we did talk about communication. City staff was on in the community during the event. Hal and I, we were out early and shutting down the roads on Hatchery. We worked with Humboldt County Roads. We worked with the Sheriff Department to get those roads shut down. Glenn was out making sure that all of our pumps and our wastewater system was functioning properly. We had other staff that came in to help with sandbags. We called in other public works. I mean, we only have 5 people in public works, so it's not a lot of people, but we did have additional public works members that came out just to kind of help pull ditches in case we were getting any um, areas where maybe the storm drains were getting plugged up with debris. So we had people out there. We were coordinating with the fire department. We had been in communication with the fire department, so the fire department was deployed. Um, the incident was very isolated to just a portion of Blue Lake, which was fortunate because I think if it had been a larger community-wide event, our resources get stretched really thin, really, really fast. So luckily, we were able to kind of keep the event, to this area. And I know Councilmember Scavani had flooding at her location off a railroad. We were monitoring that that waterway as well. That one was impacted as well. But the majority of Blue Lake really didn't experience too much. There were areas of the community that didn't even know there was a flood event happening. So it was a fairly isolated event. So it allowed us to kind of concentrate our efforts. Um, I think in the future, like I said, we're looking at, being better prepared with a stockpile of resources. Um, the weather event, we did get a weather briefing, but the weather briefing did not it it didn't provide the information to the municipalities on the level of the event that we experienced. And we had an after action meeting on that as well. And I was in contact with Humboldt County OES during the event as well. And that was one of our concerns. We knew we were going to get a weather event, but we did not anticipate getting 5 inches of rain in like 12 hours. And so that was something that overwhelmed a lot of the municipal governments were struggling with that at that point. So it was kind of a strange weather event, but I don't think it's something that we can disregard in any way because our weather is changing, the climate is changing, and these are things that we now have to learn from and anticipate and better prepare for in the future. We received, like I said, we received a lot of rain in a very, very short amount of time. If that had been spread out over a 24-hour event, we wouldn't have been in the same situation. But because it came all at once, we were definitely overloaded. And our ground was pretty saturated. So I think all in all, for what the event was and maybe what it could have been, I think we handled it pretty well. There's always opportunities to learn and to transition, and preparedness is something that it's not a stagnant activity. You're preparing, you're constantly learning and preparing as you go. And so we talked about also coordination with CERT. I know CERT met with the fire department because the fire department is actually who activates CERT. The city provides the umbrella insurance for CERT, but they are managed by the fire department. In this incident of like, if there was a large scale incident and the city was, really needed the assistance, we would coordinate with the fire department for that activation, but obviously we could go straight to CERT if we needed to. CERT members were active, but they were also active because their own properties were impacted. So there were a lot of CERT members around, but they were also filling, sandbags and things for their own properties. Lots of community support. Lots of people came out to help. The Old Crows came out. Neighbors were helping neighbors. And I think in an event like this, that's really what has to happen. The city has a role, emergency responders have a role, homeowners have a role, and then the community as a whole has a role. The city is not emergency responders. That's not our role. Our role is to make sure that city infrastructure is functioning and protected so that we can help to manage the event. Emergency responders are there to respond if there is an emergency, a life-threatening emergency or a need. That's not the city's role. Homeowners being prepared yourself as we see these events taking place and changing, having your own preparedness kits. I mean, that's something that we talk about a lot. If, we have some properties that have some historical flooding, so making sure you have your own sandbags, making sure, like Mr. Sawatsky said, being alerted and in the loop for weather events. Those are all things that we as citizens can do for ourselves to help ourselves better prepare. So I think in the future, like I said, we'll be definitely stockpiling some supplies, trying to stay on top of weather events as these things take place, continuing to open lines of communication. I think talking with CERT and the fire department about some cross training and maybe some tabletop exercises that we can do to better prepare ourselves. But I think all in all, for being a really small community and having limited resources, I I think we did pretty well. Sunday when I got up to drive around, people were out walking their dogs, the sun was shining, and it was almost as if the event had taken place. It was almost really weird. So the waters luckily receded fairly quick. And we didn't have any damage to any homes. We did have one business that had damage at Wallace and Hines. He took some floodwaters came through his property. Partially, that was part of a culvert issue located on that property that we're hoping to help kind of remediate in the future. But other than that, I think people bounce back fairly quickly from what we've been told. And we didn't have any reports of any substantial damage to report to OES. We did report Tom's damage, but that was about all we received.
Did
So in that
OES
case, did it go through a building?
It went through his office. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think it flowed. I think he
It did.
just
I talked to him the other day.
infiltrated.
He moved everything out of his office. The whole
Yeah.
office area was
Yeah.
flooded. His old bar area, which he doesn't use anymore, is full of all of his office equipment.
Mhm.
Tom Tellets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
did OES provide an after action report?
Yeah, so we always do an after action meeting.
Okay.
They call it a hot wash. And so we talked about, what had happened and what we would do better in the future. And like I said, people were taken a bit by surprise with just like I said, we knew the water was coming. We just didn't anticipate that short amount of time. That's what really caught everyone off guard. So that has been kind of a topic throughout our working with, because when we do when we have our OES meetings, the National Weather Service is there. They provide, like this morning, we had a weather briefing about this event that's coming up and just the impacts. And so the Weather Service is on, and I think there were 75 other representatives from agencies and cities and emergency responders and community advocates that are on those calls. So we get a full briefing and we get to look at the weather models. We look at hydrographs, and then we, talk about what impacts could be sustained and what resources we might need. So things that at this meeting that got talked about a lot are travel on the mountain passes, and that's something that's really critical for first responders. Trying to get up, where chains are going to be necessary, down trees. So the first responder groups prepare in a certain way, cities prepare in a certain way, other community resource providers prepare for talking about warming centers and things. So everyone's kind of got a little bit of a piece of that, and the information resonates to each entity a little bit differently based upon what your impact predictions are going to be and what your resource needs are.
Wasn't some of the problem in the county culvert that was stopped up by a plastic bag or something? And um,
It was a very big rock.
It was a lot
Oh,
of
just-
debris came down. So,
okay,
yeah.
all
And
right.
that rock has been there for a long time. It's not 100% the county's fault. There's a lot of things that played into what happened, but the rock that was removed out of that culvert has been there a very long time.
I was going to ask if there's been some mitigation
Yeah,
to
so
that situation so that things will flow a little more easily, because I understand that in a perfect scenario that is supposed to flow down towards the Mad River. Basically, it's not supposed to flow into Blue Lake.
no, so basically the county, the state culvert is a new culvert. It comes down
Oh,
the hill off of the 299,
oh,
and then it comes into the private culvert that's owned on the property by the Patriot. And then
oh,
that culvert then flows into the county culvert, which is the big cement kind of triangle culvert above the school and runs
oh,
along
okay,
there. What
okay.
happened was when everything came down into that private culvert, that
Mm.
culvert couldn't handle what was coming down and it got plugged up with debris. There were rocks. They were pulling rocks out like crazy. And so
Okay.
it quickly overwhelmed that culvert, which then made it hop out of the county. And so it just sheeted it across the road. And then that came across the road and then came right down Greenwood. So all the water was off the hill was coming into Blue Lake at that point. So the goal, what everyone was working towards, was trying to re-divert that back into the county culvert, because it was also coming into the shepherd's property and coming down and starting to flood there.
So that culvert that you said
Maybe.
was supposed to above the school, where does that empty?
I don't know. That probably goes into the storm drain system. Some of it could come into our system. It might go out by um, where the Welcome to Blake sign is. There's a whole wetland system in over there that has a creek system and stuff. So it probably somewhere goes into that. That culvert system could handle the water. It's just that it didn't go to it. So instead of
Right.
going to it, it
Right.
came right into town.
So is this drainage that's coming off the freeway?
Yeah, it's a big new culvert that's above the 299 that's coming down.
There's like three of them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's big. Yeah, it just got installed. I think it was just last year was finalized.
Yeah, because they had that whole right lane section
Mhm.
blocked off
Yeah.
for months.
So have we heard from the Rancheria about their flooding or the source of their flooding?
Mm-mm.
I haven't, I was just curious if they had identified any particular problem or source that inundated them.
No, we haven't had any contact with the Rancheria. During the flood event, I did go down to reach out to see if we could get sandbags and any resources because they do have the resiliency center, and they didn't have any staffing on at that point. So I was able to talk to a security guard who informed me that from what he knew, they didn't have any resources and they didn't have any staff on on staff at that point. So later in the day, during towards the evening, when they started to experience flooding, they were starting to evacuate their facility and they were evacuating it down Charton into Blue Lake into our flood zone. And so I met with their fire chief at that point and one of their representatives to redirect to get them to stop directing traffic because they were directing traffic into Charton that was then having to turn around. And so people were turning around people's yards and it just created a whole problem. And so we were able to get them to redirect and get them back out of because they had a concert that was people were coming in to the casino for a concert. And so there was a ton of cars coming in. And so it was
Right,
just
and they canceled it.
they canceled it, but those car people didn't know.
So they weren't directing people back up
They
to
were
the
so we
boulevard?
finally got them to direct them back up and out to the highway. So they were telling them basically our road is closed, keep going. And so that sent all of that traffic down Charton Road to the end where we were flooded down here. And so we were telling cars to turn around. And so all of a sudden we were taking all of the traffic from the casino into Blue Lake into an area that needed to reroute them. So we had a major cluster. So we were able to coordinate with them and get them to get staff up on the highway to at the roundabout to let people know that it's closed. You can't come in, and then also redirecting all the traffic that they were evacuating from their site to evacuate them back up and not down Charton Road.
Okay. Well, I know that at least one home was lost on the Rancheria. And there may have been more, but they experienced quite a lot of flooding and they started flooding pretty early. I actually drove through there, I want to say maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was quite a lot of flooding, but it got a lot worse.
Mhm.
Um, and if anyone's read what I wrote here, I was just sharing that with staff. I didn't expect it to be here, but it's kind of, it's all relevant information. So the creek next to my house hadn't flooded for 25 years, and 25 years ago it flooded 3 years in a row. And it turned out that that was because the culvert was failing under the road at some point. It was collapsing, and so the city did go ahead and repair that and replace that culvert. Um, there's probably something we're in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 feet of culvert underground. So the open creek system feeds into that. So like I say, it's been 25 years since that system was overwhelmed, and it actually became overwhelmed further upstream than that culvert. That culvert didn't fail, but I suppose it may have failed if the water had gotten to it. Um, and also what I mentioned here is that some of those debris catchers that were put in place by the PG&E folks that did the PG&E work were still there, and so that caused flooding. And myself and some of my neighbors actually pulled those out and were able to relieve the flooding that was about to overwhelm two other homes because those weren't draining. I mean, I'm talking like the giant graded manhole, um, stuff was just totally overwhelmed. So one of my neighbors, Dave Nakamura, who used to be on the council, he got elected to go stand under the drain and help me guide my pry bar into the grate so we could pick it up. And anyway, it was a little bit entertaining, but he was in over 2 feet of water standing there. So so that's a little something that the city staff might have been able to help us with before the storm hit to make sure all of those grates were clear. Um, and Hal did come by when we were taking care of that, and I asked him about sandbags, and he said he was going to go get some sand. At that point, from our purposes, it was too late for us to be putting up sandbags because we were already underwater. Um, so I don't know what triggers the whole sand and sandbag thing. Um, I remember years and years ago, I remember coming down here in the middle of the night and getting sandbags, but I don't recall all those years back, at what point the whole process got triggered. For my purposes personally, I would have needed sandbags at least an hour or two before the sand was available.
The
So,
sand was available the night before.
It was.
Was it?
Hal was
We
going
had
to
a
get
sand
more
station.
sand
He was
because we
getting
ran
more
out.
sand.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, before it even started raining, there was sand and sandbags out there.
Okay.
We prepped everything the
So,
night before.
so how was that communicated to the community then?
Well, I mean, we usually have sand at the city courtyard, and so most of the people who are along the creek who normally need sandbags, there's just a couple of properties that are kind of our normal um, uh, residents that require that. Um, with the shutdown of the road, we had to move that location. So it was in a pretty prominent location here that was the new sandbag station.
Well, I did see it here.
Mhm.
But so there was no sandbag. The sand the night before was at the courtyard.
No,
Is
the
that what you
sand was here.
was here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's easier for us to not, if we have the sandbag station here, then I don't have to have a staff there. If it's at the courtyard,
Sure.
then we have to open it. And so the last event that we had last year, I had to staff the city corporation yard until like, I don't know, it was like 11 o'clock at night. We were out there in the rain helping people. It was just one resident, but we quickly realized that it's better to put it in a location that you don't need a staff member to open the gate and close the gate. So,
Well, historically, it was out here.
20, like the event you're talking about 25 years ago. I remember being out here filling sandbags.
Yeah. There were 3 years in a row where it's pretty bad.
It seems like it might be prudent if you live near a water source like that, like a creek, that you might want to just have your own sandbags, like because
Well, again,
especially with the weather changing and there
if
being
you
more flooding.
expected, well, I will because now I
Yeah,
know, and I'll
right.
store
Yeah.
them and they'll be available.
Yeah.
But it just if I knew there was a source of sandbags, I might have chosen an hour earlier to go get some. But I didn't know there was a source. I looked on all the Facebook pages and all the everything, and it was just like, nobody was talking about, hey, we're really going to be in trouble, and here's what we have to offer. So, um,
I'm pretty sure
so
I
I
saw
didn't.
a post on Facebook on at least the Blue Lake Happenings page that sandbags were available at City Hall. At least there was more than one post about that.
Well, I did see it after the fact, but I don't know
So
if it happened beforehand.
it was before.
Right. But that's something I'm asking. I'm kind of proposing that the city,
Yeah.
when the city has a resource available to the public, that we have some sort of an official um, posting or some way to get that information out to people. Um, I think that would be appropriate. And anyway, obviously it was a very unusual event. 25 years is a long time to go between floods. So, you know, I didn't jump in my truck and go look for sand because I thought it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I watched the water get deeper and deeper. I'm like, it can't happen. It can't happen. That culvert's going to get overwhelmed. And it didn't. It was the culvert up the street. Um, but anyway, live and learn.
Well, thank you for all the work that the city did, and thank you, CERT people. And yeah, one idea I had was, and you're here today, Angela. You do sewing. Now, one of the things that I heard was that the sandbags, like they were using grain bags, but they're kind of too big. What kind of a bag could it be? Something that could be sewn, like a project, and like the city could do a project of sewing?
The
Are they
feed
burlap?
bags were donated by Julie Christie in an emergency because we ran out of sandbags. It
Exactly.
wasn't like,
Yeah.
and now that we have a stockpile,
Oh,
of
we
them,
have
don't-
plenty.
Yeah, we have a
normal.
lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, normally
Hundred.
Might
sandbags
be a
are
fun
not
project.
That
Make your own sandbag.
that was a Blue Lake Facebook emergency post. Hey, we need bags, and Julie came down with a bunch of bags.
Okay.
Are the
So
bags typically like burlap?
No, it's like a
bags or-
plastic mylar, but
Oh,
like
Or-
a woven mylar bag.
got it. Okay.
A lot like feed sacks, but a little heavier and smaller, and they have a
And
tie.
smaller,
A
right?
tie on.
Yeah,
And they
smaller
have an
ones, yes.
open
So-
drain. They're not sealed.
How many sandbags do we normally stockpile?
Well, they come in bundles of 25. They cost about 50 cents. So we usually have a couple hundred, which, we wouldn't even have gone through half of our sandbags if what happened up on the county side hadn't happened.
Mhm.
So that's where we just got overwhelmed. I think we bought, I think I bought $100. I was able to get, couple hundred sandbags from Pearson. So,
Mhm.
and then since then, all of a sudden there's just everyone's got sandbags that they're giving out. I think the resource center got an allocation of sandbags. So I think we have literally hundreds of sandbags right now. So we're more than prepped. But what we'll do is, our public safety commissioner, Stephanie had recommended maybe we have a couple stockpiles in different locations, which I think is a great idea. So we talked about having a stockpile at the old county barn, what's now the other fire station uptown, City Hall, the corporation yard. So we can kind of just move things around. But yeah, we're fine on sandbags.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I did end up using a bunch of feed sacks that I had, and I used probably 50 sandbags
Mhm.
to protect the part of my property that flooded, the part of the house. And so I think we should, I don't know, maybe the city should have something more like 1,000 sandbags on hand, um, just at a general, just kind of a par level of what to keep. I think 200 is based on my usage and need, is it's not gonna do the trick. So, um,
But as mentioned before, people who live in that area should be prepared for that. It's not.
Yes.
It's not.
I understand, Chris, but let's not penalize people for
We're
not
gonna.
for not
not
using
being
their
prepared?
crystal balls correctly.
No, I'm not saying
Okay.
they shouldn't use a crystal ball, but it's not the city's responsibility for them to take care of
I
themselves.
think it is
They're
the city's
adults.
responsibility to have adequate emergency equipment, that is reasonable on hand. I think it is.
It's,
Yeah.
no, it's like we handing out free healthcare to everybody in the city.
I think
It's
think it's not the same thing.
it's close.
Okay, well, this
Yeah.
is a discussion item only.
Yes.
So
right.
if we're done discussing at the council level, I can open it up to the public. If there's anyone that would like to make questions or comments, Lynn Glenn, and then Kent Sawatsky, and then Julie.
Thank you. I am here as one of the coordinators of the Applewood Broderick Charton pod. As we know, we have emergency preparedness pods here in Blue Lake. There are 3 different pods. And our pod has 14 families, and 11 of our families were affected by the flooding. From things like raw sewage in a bathtub, from 4 feet of water from the property. We had water flowing out of. We have a system that usually works under most circumstances, but it was exceeding the system and flowing down towards the Rancheria. We had people with flood waters to the foot of coming into their front doors. There was a lot of stress with some families, and we had a good discussion at Public Safety Commission, and some good ideas came up. And this discussion right here tonight has been really helpful, because we are going to have as part of what we do as a preparedness pod, as we talk about what could happen in our neighborhood and what we should do to be better prepared. Because the better prepared that all the citizens are, the less stress on the city staff. The city has a big role to play in every emergency. So we had some questions that we came up with, and some of them were answered tonight. We wanted to know what are our responsibilities, to be prepared for flooding. And I think, certainly we, two of our families had sandbags that we contributed to the city when the city ran out, and we've replenished our supply, of course. But having sand is something the city can do. And Glenn said that there was sand down at the courtyard, but you couldn't get to the courtyard because it was flooded.
We were
So,
able to access. We'd made several trips to the courtyard.
I mean, citizens couldn't get
Oh
down
no,
there,
no,
right?
we didn't. Well, the road was closed down, so
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he realized that was going to happen. So they brought, and they do often have sand up here. I think that's kind of a tradition. So there was sand, and that I think is a very appropriate role for the city to have for the citizens because it's not practical for us all going to the beach and our buckets. Um, and so we wanted to know if the city would always have sandbags. Is that kind of something we can expect? And what our responsibilities were. Another thing was we lived right next to the creek. We had, like I said, up to 4 feet of water on our property and some pretty big flows. We had some streams going through, and partly because the creek was not flowing properly. So we're wondering if it's possible for the city to annually go in there and clear out the willows and the berries that every year, grow up, fall down, and impede the flow of the water in the creek. Because we think if the water had been able to flow freely, it probably would have been less, it wouldn't have overtopped as quickly and as much as it did. So that's just something we wanted to ask if the city can do. The other thing is the noticing that you're talking about, and I have I'm on a commission on a committee with somebody from NOAA. He's the warning coordinator. So I asked him, so what happened? Was the city notified? Were we as notified as property owners? Because there was a pretty specific notice on NOAA's website that I saw that night after the fact. It said disastrous flooding of all areas near the river from Blue Lake to the mouth. Residents should be prepared to take appropriate action to protect lives and property, homes in Blue Lake. So there was some pretty specific knowledge that they had and predicted. But there wasn't really a way for them to get it to the city right now. He said it's OES gets it, but like Mandy was saying, this is kind of different because of the short time period that rain came down. So it was a prediction, but not definite. So Ryan said he would be willing to meet with the city and just talk about, well, what could you do? How could we work better together in the future? Because Blue Lake will be always vulnerable because of where we are on the river. So that's something that the city might consider.
I believe that was our 3-minute timer.
Okay.
I would
Was it?
like
Yeah.
to ask
Yeah.
Linda continue because she's our spokesperson from CERT, and she should be able to continue what she has to tell us.
I just had one quick thing to say, is that we visited other homes along the creek just to see if they needed sandbags because there really wasn't any communication directly with homeowners. I talked to Glenn on the phone because I happened to have his number to ask him about sand, and he said, "Could you please go talk to Karina because she's called and she's having some problems." And so we went down and got her some sandbags, but there really wasn't anybody checking to make sure people were okay on the creek, and that's something CERT could certainly do, and we've talked with the city about that. In the future, maybe it's something we can help with. Because again, the more we can do as citizens, better easier it is for staff to do their jobs to help us all be prepared and deal with the floods.
And we need more CERT people.
We do need more in terms of recruitment. Oh, absolutely. So anybody
Yeah,
who'd like to join
always.
CERT, people with
Lots of
strong back,
Yes,
who,
absolutely.
who could prepare sandbags would be
Young
great.
CERT people, right?
Young CERT people would be really helpful. Yeah. If you know anybody who might be only 23 hours of training, one meeting a month, or they don't have to come to meetings.
So do you have CERT people on your CERT committee, or what do you call
On our
yourselves,
CERT team,
or your
yes.
team, right? But then do you have like um other auxiliary members or a list of people that you can call on when there is something going on and you need more response?
We did do that, and actually the crows. So it's our auxiliary. So we have some email lists. We because personally we are connected to the crows and the Lolas. We put out a notice as individuals. We weren't activated as CERT members, and some crows came down, like Andy was saying, to help out.
And then so you can put out the call for more help, and those people don't have to necessarily join CERT.
Oh, absolutely. I shouldn't say that. Yes, we can as individuals, but there's a process that people can need to be
purposes.
disaster volunteer workers that are sworn in by the city to be able to work officially for the city. So all of the CERT members are already sworn in, so we're prepared. So, yeah, so we're willing to help, and thank you for the information to help us prepare. And we should talk more about it, I think, in the future.
Thank you.
Kent Sawatsky and then Julie.
It's standard in a public forum when you have a timer up there, someone's timing, that timer is turned toward the person so they can tell how far, much more time they have to speak. That's greatly appreciated. The problem, and you got a report from your city manager, but I'm going to give a little more report of what the people said at the meeting. And I think maybe you might want to see the minutes if they were accurately taken of the meeting. And a lot of the problem they felt was a total lack of communication. That's what I heard from the people who spoke at that meeting. And there are suggestions, just so you know, in the county, your positions up here, if you were in a county supervisor, you would be going off to training for a full week to deal with emergencies. And I think some form of training here should take place. And you're the people who, as soon as there's a weather forecast where you might have a problem, you should be getting information of that and you should be on call. Should you need to come down and be the emergency services, that's what your job is. That's part of what I believe the description should be if it's not, because you're the people who are elected. You should have the knowledge and you have the authority to do things that other people don't. Uh, my understanding is certain could have, should have, would have been brought into to play by either the city manager. I understand she can do it, it's my understanding, or the fire department. Well, apparently there wasn't communication between those two to the effect that they knew it was happening. My next topic here, I will go into some specifics regarding what we need to do. Just so you know, this next weather thing, this is one of the most dangerous times for weather, is if we have snow, like we get 2 or 3 feet of snow in the hills, and then we get a south wind rain coming in, that you get the equivalent of maybe 4 inches of rain that's in snow, 4 inches of warm rain coming in, and you get 8 inches of water within a matter of a few hours. And just as fast as that can melt, you can end up with this very large flow. That's what's happened in the past when we had the 95 incident, which was way larger than what this one amounted to. So you may wish to watch those particular things. I personally feel that during an emergency like this, you should have a staff member, one of your staff members, to answer questions at City Hall. Somebody who's trained to do that. The main thing was they didn't know who to call, who to get a hold of. One person went through, wasn't mentioned, went through 911 and was told they couldn't be helped. A person who's right down here in this area down here. And she was very disturbed, about not being able to get, she called Mike Wilson and he couldn't help her either. So whatever that says. But anyway, I think you really need to have some communication for the people. They're just, and it may be on some Facebook thing, maybe. I came down here and I came down and there was no sand when I came down here. I went back to my house, got sand and a tarp. When I came back, Julie Christie's bags were here. Sand was being filled. So there was a major void with no sandbags available. They opportunity to speak.
Julie.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for being so patient with letting council discuss the subject in public. I think that's really important that, during situations like this, we do have reflection. I think listening to the intent are very important as well. They have a lot of years and knowledge, in our area. Our family's treated 90 years here, with the River Bar. And being connected with the community of farmers and truckers that decided to serve, I think that our resiliency here is actually very fragile, and we can always be very conscious of that. It only takes 2 weeks to empty our food shelves at the store. It only takes 2 weeks without power for us to feel like we're in a third country. And especially with the girls coming in stuff, this farmer is working his butt off tonight, trucking in 100 plus stages of corn with the weather. I did get studying on one store because it fell over from the county, it's off the roadway. I did contact Andy because I think that's in food, and the feedback to me, or I deal with the side if we need them, or I need food. But I think we could do maybe a more about like we did a road study program where we are looking at our infrastructure, we're looking at the areas that we need to put support towards the county to set support housing and have our voice on a gate call so that we are acknowledged with our issues that we need. and as the supervisor level. So I think this is a bigger topic for tonight. I was thinking to revisit this topic and hopefully sooner than later before the next weather event, because Christopher's gonna giggle, but we were getting chemtrailed like crazy today. If you guys take out and watch the planes and they're regular flights, just saying, you wanna laugh about it, you know, it's funny, but at the same time, we're in a tour. That a lot of people don't wanna take the time to do homework on and read critical studies as a given. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, we'll come back to council. Again, this is a discussion item only. So I think we have a lot of really good ideas, and planning for an event like this is very important. Appreciate the people that stepped up, CERT and the sandbags from Julie, and of course our city staff always working really hard for us.
So I am curious because somebody wrote to me, somebody who was in the Bay Area wrote to me and said, "Hey, does the city need sandbags? Is there something we can go somewhere and get them and bring them home?" Because they were, they were prepared to come home early and bring us more sandbags, and I had to tell her I didn't know what the situation was. I hadn't gotten any information, and so that, you know, that that brings up the good point. Like, does the council have a role in disaster response, and what is that?
Well, we used to before we had a city management form of government, because I was on the council for one of our flood events, and literally Sherman Shapiro and I were going door to door along Broderick and talking to people and seeing what they needed. And there were people there was one lady who had a little girl playing in flood water in the living room. We told her, you need to leave as soon as possible because we don't know what that water is that you're playing in. And then the other thing often was done was we used to have a truck, and literally someone would be in the back with a megaphone telling people what to do, that there was sandbags at City Hall or something like that. So, I mean, there's all these old school ways to do things that sometimes you need to do when there's an event and possibly phones or something don't even work anymore. So,
Right.
there is a role. Yeah.
Well, and disaster management has changed drastically. After Katrina, we learned a lot about communication and training and having a coordinated system. And that's where the incident command system comes into play. And that's what we all train on. So all municipalities, staff trains on the ICS, all emergency responders train on the ICS, all state and federal employees train on the ICS, which is a coordinated command system. And so we all speak the same language when it comes to emergency response. And so we routinely train on that. And that's how incidents are now managed, because in the past they were very disjointed. And as disasters and events became more severe and more regular, a an old school system of a PA on a truck just isn't going to work anymore. And so it's really about training, identifying your resources, and making sure that everyone's working and talking and speaking the same language. um, and so that's where incident management has gone. And that's that's where we all train with FEMA. Our staff is trained through the incident command system. We're required to meet certain thresholds of training levels. I have a higher level threshold of training. Um, and then we also have it as emergency responders if we're members of the volunteer fire department. So it's because what's important in an emergency is that you don't overwhelm your resources, and that you spread your resources to the areas that they best can respond to, and you don't have the city being in charge of everything, because we know that with a small staff, the city can't take it on. So there's things that are going to be dropped. So the city does not respond door to door. That's not our job. If you are stuck in your home and you have an emergency, you don't call Mandy, you call 911, and 911 has a dispatch system. So they make sure they triage that event, and they make sure that they dispatch to you the resources that you need. And that's either law enforcement, it's medical, or it's fire response, or it's a combination thereof. If there's something going on in the city that we need to be alerted to, then they'll alert us. So if there's, a gas leak or something and we need to come in and be able to shut down roads or different things, we'll coordinate our response, but it needs to come in through a single system so that then that is triaged appropriately and that response is spread across the appropriate resources. And so that's something that I think, there were some comments at the Public Safety Commission about, why didn't the city come to my door? Why didn't the city? Because that's not the city's role. And
Because we used to do that.
because we don't have the resources to do that. So the city's role is to make sure our infrastructure is protected, is to make sure that, that we're making sure that, our systems are up and running. And then at that point, if all of that's being taken care of, then yes, absolutely, our staff can go and, assist. But everyone has a role to play, and we need to stay within that role to make sure that those efforts are coordinated appropriately. And I think that's critical. I've been on several incidents. I've trained at the FEMA Center in Maryland. I've done fires and flood events. And it is when you're coordinating an incident and everyone is going by the command system, it's amazing how much smoother that event is. And so chaos ensues when there's not clear communication and clear role establishment. So yeah, everyone does have a role to play. You as council would have, if there was a large scale incident in Blue Lake, you would have a role to play. The mayor could be a spokesperson for the city. Um, the city manager, I would be running the event, and at the point where it was beyond my capacity, I would turn that incident command over to someone else. So if it was something that, a major earthquake and, there were a lot of things taking place that were outside of my control, I would turn that incident command over. I could turn it over to the fire chief to run that incident. But you have one incident commander, and, everyone has a piece of that response at that point. So,
So whoever's highest qualified to come in,
mhm.
and then there's a dedicated tree and flow chart that you
Yeah.
follow.
And we have mutual aid agreements in place with all of our partner agencies. So we have mutual aid agreements in place. If there was an incident, part of our continuing operations plan is that if the city was impacted and we could not run the city from here, we would go to McKinleyville Community Services District. And we have an agreement with them in place already that we could set up our systems, we could run our computers, our networks, everything through their office. Humboldt Bay is a resource provider. All of our municipal partners are all part of our mutual aid providers. So if we needed a water operator, if something happened, Glenn wasn't here, I've got a problem, I can pull a water operator from Arcata, Eureka, Humboldt Bay. Everyone works together and coordinates, and that's part of, having those mutual aid partners in place, because we don't always have all the resources necessary, but we all work together and we coordinate for those responses.
So did the flood trigger the incident
No.
command?
No, because it wasn't it wasn't it didn't really meet the threshold of I mean, it was definitely an incident, but it wasn't beyond the capacity of a local response. And so we did manage the incident in communication with the fire department, and their fire department is management of CERT. So that communication was set up and everyone had their roles to play. And so we knew we were in direct communication with each other on response, and like I said, the any issue with someone who was felt unsafe or where that needed to go through the proper dispatch for emergency services, not the city. So we were coordinating all of our efforts at that point.
Okay. So you didn't feel like you needed to let the council know or ask for more help from anywhere?
At that point, and it was such an isolated event. We were managing fairly well at that, once the rains receded and stopped, we were waiting for the waters just to go down. There wasn't no one was stuck in a home that couldn't get out. There was no complete failure of infrastructure. We just had a lot of water sitting there, and, waiting for it to recede to then see what the damage was at that point. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Did you did you have one more question?
No,
Okay.
I missed the whole thing. I flew to Washington that morning,
Oh, you were out of state.
but I was
Okay.
watching it. I could see it all on
Right.
Facebook.
And I was watching
The
what's
porta
happening in
potty
Southern
bombing.
California.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the porta potty.
So do we have a future time where we're gonna look at a tabletop?
Yeah, we have actually been trying to schedule a tabletop for about
We
two,
have.
well, about 3 years now. COVID really put a crimp in all of that. And then what our plan was with public safety was our public safety commission was to do a Blue Lake specific tabletop where we would exercise a large scale event, but only with our Blue Lake resources. So the school, the fire department, CERT, the city, the rancheria, because that's going to be that's probably going to be our biggest scenario is when Blue Lake is actually cut off from other resources and we need to isolate on our own. And so we've been working to try and schedule that, and we've had it tentatively scheduled numerous times because we've asked Office of Emergency Services to help coordinate that. The problem is we've been in like a sustained pattern of disasters, whether it's floods, fires, earthquakes. And so resources have been spread really thin through all of our service providers. So trying to get everyone together to coordinate that effort has been really tough. So we're just kind of in a holding pattern right now saying, hey, we really want this. As soon as your resources are freed up, we'd really like someone to come in and facilitate this exercise. Tabletop exercises are amazing. I mean, you don't have to, you can learn a lot by through a tabletop exercise. I've been through several, and they can be as intense and as you need them to be able to exercise your resources. They're very, very stressful, but they're a great tool to be able to learn what you know and what you don't know, and what resources you have and what you don't have. And so it's, like I said, it's been on the radar trying to get it scheduled. We just haven't been able to pull in the facilitators yet to be able to do that. But it's definitely something we want to do.
So maybe we could plan a Blue Lake only on a Saturday kind of a thing with folks that we do have access to sooner instead of later. I mean, if it's going to take maybe another year before we can do the big tabletop exercise, maybe we should think about doing something smaller that's um, you know, that we can manage without OES. Just to get maybe, I mean, recruit a few more volunteers, get people a little more aware of what resources we do have, and try to move towards a better response, and have a more coordinated response maybe the next time it rains too much or whatever.
And having been through those tabletop exercises, it is really helpful to have an outside agency facilitate. So if we are talking about doing a tabletop exercise outside of OES's support in the interim, then I would suggest we look to another municipality, another organization to facilitate that. It's much more clean having an outside person do that.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Right. And to your point about OES, when I was at Eureka High School, for 5 years, I tried to get them to come out and do an active shooter training, tabletop training with staff. And they
5 years.
Just 5 years. I was there 5.5 years, and I couldn't get them to come. It was really awful. It was really felt very vulnerable, So we ended up doing some just Q&As really with EPD is how we ended up having to, support staff in their concerns about that.
Yeah, there's a bit of, I mean, there's a bit of a art and science to running a tabletop, because what you're really trying to do is exercise from your chair an actual event and management of resources and response. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And so you have a facilitator who's creating a scenario, and basically they create a scenario, they give it to you, and then they're feeding you additional items. Now the dam is going to break. Now you got power lines down. Now the school needs to be evacuated, but 299 is inaccessible. And so through that process, you're given a certain amount of time to then start responding. And it's like, okay, I need to contact the fire department. We need vans, we need transport. Who's going to call the kids? And the facilitators watching that whole process as well to see how you're responding. Like I said, I did a tabletop in Maryland where people were literally crying. They were so stressed out because it was coming at them. So it becomes a real scenario in your mind, and it's really important to do it right and to be able to really get to those, those core needs and response, actions that you're taking so that you go back. Because what you do afterwards, you go back and go, wow, like we did really good here, but we really messed up here. Or we realize, like, if that happened, like we don't have those resources or we don't have those contacts. And guess what? We just lost this facility because of this. And so there's a whole after action that goes into it as well to really dive in very deeply into what you're lacking, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then how you move that forward into, your next steps, which is training, resource management, resource acquisition, contacts, so pretty it's a pretty important process. And I think it's important to do it right. It's
Well, I don't want to get in the way of that at all, but I think it would be effective to have some sort of a weekend meeting in conjunction with CERT where the city sponsors an event. We have it at the Grange. We invite the community to attend, and we, make it all about, emergency preparedness, what you can do, how citizens can help. So,
Are you
you
talking
know,
more like an emergency preparedness fair, like where
Yeah,
you
that
have your
sounds
resource
more
it could
like
be
agencies, or
anything.
that's
I
because
mean,
yeah.
we could do that. That's something that the Public Safety Commission does a yearly annual event, and they're planning theirs now. And in the past, they've done like tsunami preparedness and different things. They've actually done kind of what you're talking about, where they brought in all the resource agencies so the community could come through and meet Red Cross and Office of Emergency Services or the sheriff and everyone. To be able to see what resources are available in your community. That's something that they could do as part of their annual event.
and where do they do it?
We've done it at the Grange, and the last one we actually had in the park.
Hmm. And
Mhm.
what time of year?
I believe it's usually. It seems like it was like late. Is it October? Yeah, seems like it was
So
dark and
that
cold.
so public safety is already planning for something like this to
Yeah, they're
happen.
kind of taking ideas right now. That'll be on their next meeting, is
Oh,
talking
good.
about what they like to do. So if that's something the council would like us to bring forward, I'd be
Yeah.
happy to make that recommendation to
Yeah, I was going to suggest that that be put on their agenda, that we're very
Mhm.
interested in something like that occurring again. And maybe with a focus on floods. I don't know if we need to do it specifically to that, but might be a good thing to focus on.
Yeah, bringing up the whole school. It's a good thing that happened on a Saturday, really, because it would have been more stressful if parents were trying to get, worried about their children and everything.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to think about in that instance.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 7, Powers Creek gravel remediation. And the general information is that Kent Sawatsky has requested staff to place a discussion item on the agenda regarding Powers Creek and gravel remediation. Mr. Sawatsky has provided no additional backup documentation regarding this discussion item. And then there's an email from Mr. Sawatsky. As you are aware, the public has a legal right to put items on the agenda for Blue Lake City Council meetings. Please put the following topic on: Dave Powers Creek flooding remediation. This would include input from the public and possible direction to staff. Being an initial conversation, I do not anticipate any support documents at this time. Please acknowledge receipt of this request. Okay.
I
I'm,
already have a Powers Creek restoration program in place. though.
yeah, I know. That's what I was gonna
Yeah, we have a
say.
project that we're working on right now.
Let's do this summer, right?
How is that
Mhm.
affecting? Is that affecting the flow of the river, the creek in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the creek has a huge sediment loading issue, and that's part of the creek restoration will be to remove that sediment remove the invasive vegetation, uh, put back in native plants, probably some habitat structure, and try to return it more to a as much of a normal waterway as you can for something that's so impacted, by kind of an urban footprint. So,
Are
So
there any other agencies that the city's working with on that?
oh yeah, every agency.
I would imagine
It's
so.
like alphabet soup.
Yeah, I would imagine
NOAA,
so.
Change their
CDFW,
name.
US.
What did they change their name?
We have DWR, we have State Water Board, we have
Fish and
U.S. Fish
Game
and
used to be,
Wildlife,
Yeah.
State
Mhm.
Fish and
Fish,
Wildlife, NOAA.
Yeah.
so who's the lead agency on the project?
Well, the city and the Bottawa Watershed Council
That's what they're
have the
called.
project, and so we're co-leads with the Bottawa Watershed Council
Probably coastal
on this.
commissions involved too.
I was gonna say,
No, we are not. We are not in the
you
coastal
serious?
zone.
Not in the
No,
zone.
do not invoke
No,
the
we're
coastal
not.
They
commission.
infringe
That's
on
crazy.
everything.
No, no, we're
They
too
they
far
can
inland.
So
it doesn't matter. They
Navigable waterway.
Oh,
Water goes there.
Waterway. They
Navigable
stop up
waterway.
in Reading.
Mhm.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no, not
Yeah, yeah.
us.
so I understand there's like a $600,000 grant that was
It's 960,000, I believe.
okay. So do we have a start date for the project?
We are working on an implementation schedule right now. Our goal right now is to do vegetation removal this year and then go to construction the next following season because there's only short windows where you can actually work in the creek. And there's also a very limited number of contractors that are qualified to do creek restoration work. And those contractors are pretty much bid out at this point. And so our bid package isn't ready yet to go out for bid. So we're not anticipating getting a contractor that could come in, and our permits aren't all in place yet. So we're still finalizing design, engineering, and permitting. But the goal is to go to vegetation removal this year.
And do you have to finalize all that stuff in order to do that?
Yes.
And so are you the person at the city that's working on the project?
I'm one of the people at the city that's working on the project. Our SHN Engineering is working on the project. Gary Reese is doing a lot of the CEQA. The Ottawa Watershed Council has staffing that's also working on the project in various forms. So it's a coordinated effort. We have a hydrology team that's involved in doing the hydrologic analysis and most of the design of the project. So it's it's a good team.
And that hydrology team, is that part of the Blue Lake City team or part of the Bottawa Watershed Council
So the
team?
Ottawa Watershed Council is contracting with SHN Engineering to do the design and permitting and engineering work, and Northern Hydrology is part of SHN's team that they brought on.
Okay. So Ottawa Watershed Council is leading that effort
Yes.
there.
Who's been going into the creek and like creating these pathways? And
So we had to cut into the creek to be able to shoot the topos, to be able to establish grade so that they could do the design and engineering work. So part of the problem is that the creek is really, really overly vegetated. And so we literally you can't walk up and down the creek. It's completely vegged over. So we actually had to go in and cut pathways in to be able to get the surveyors into the creek bed to find the creek bed, and two, to be able to shoot the topos so that they could finish all their surveys.
Okay, this is a discussion item only. Is there any further questions or comments from
I'll
council?
comment on how difficult it is to do anything in a watershed.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work with biologists and with runoff and anything. And if a squirrel farts within 100 yards of a dry creek bed, you have to get a biologist out there to look at it.
Pretty much.
Well, I know years ago when we tried to remove tires, big tires from the creek, which we all thought was hazardous and whatever, but Fish and Game said no, they were a fish habitat.
Mhm.
So we couldn't remove those ugly things. So I know it is a
Also,
tricky
they cause
situation.
turbulence, so you get pools of water behind them. That instead it reduces sediment.
Mhm.
Tires do a lot of cool things.
Okay, I will open this up to public if there's any. Kent Sawatsky. and then Julie.
I appreciate you agendizing this, although I didn't mention gravel in my request at all. It was Dave Powers Creek flooding remediation. Um, and you have some major problems here, and I don't know whether they're being addressed. I would like any of you who have the time to go down and look at the design work for the pedestrian bridge down behind the Gincana. I went down there and looked at that. That particular bridge probably has cut the flow of that creek down by my just a rough estimate 20 to 25%. Yet the bearing for the bridge was put out in the flowway instead of being back on the bank. The bridge probably should have been 10 to 12 feet longer. There's riprap that's been put in there to further constrict that. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that particular area has no ability to go down further because we have our water and sewer lines encased in concrete right there. So you are in imminent danger of this last time Mandy was down there was one small little tree hung up on your other pedestrian bridge there that was possibly going to continue to hang up. We got rid of that right away before they shut the bridge down. But you're in a position down there that if that you get a log jam on that creek due to that bridge being there, that whole creek will divert out into other people's property. And that's quite possibly something that will happen. I also would ask that you do an assessment regarding your culvert depths, regarding how much gravel you have in different things. Underneath my particular building, flow used to be quite easy to go through there. If you go look there, the berry vines that have accumulated, come down in floods, have built up silt. So the flow underneath my building is probably constricted by 10% at least, the same as your culvert were constricted and historically has been underneath the road. Those are all things that need to be done. I'll be quite honest with you. It'd be great to just go ahead and think you can go ahead 2 years. I highly recommend that you do some remediation on some of these things, like that bridge be redesigned, the riprap be removed, and possibly something going on there. It only takes 1 year to flood and take out everybody, and it's your responsibility to maintain that. And this is why I put this on here. I think if you, common sense just went down and took a look at that pedestrian bridge, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I've sent a bunch of people down, they go, you're right. That riprap shouldn't have been in there. The whole bridge should have been designed different. I mean, even Chris might be able to design it. You put wings on your abutments so it doesn't undermine them. Pretty simple engineering. And unless we're willing to take a look at those things, you're going to have loss of life and property as far as people. If that plugs up this season, next season, then that's on you guys. So I highly recommend you go down and have some engineer do a study on that particular one. I'd love to see the engineering and elevations for this project, and I think you would also. I mean, so we know what's going to be done, so we can tell whether you're remediating and doing your due diligence. So that would be appreciated to have that information to be made available to the public. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Julie?
Can you guys hear me okay?
You're still a little soft.
Speak loudly. We appreciate this being on the agenda. I have requested a trip restoration update. And so this is very well in respect of that. Because so that was listed on our agenda, respectively, given the packet agenda. I do agree with the restoration of that bridge. From historical years, right, when I worked through there, I used to be able to ride up to the beach, light, all of, I used to have to jump the bank prior to the bridge, and there was a lot of sediment removed and brought back in it. There's also, minute reporting on Access Humboldt, where I believe it was Lisa Lubin, who was very concerned back when Niagara Alliance and the city and our employees were doing all the restorations. She was concerned that volunteers weren't very adequate for doing the project, and during that time of the project, I had a lot of concerns and thoughts as well, coincided with her. So I was very happy that someone else spoke up about that. But I think it's just seeing the backlash of that now. So I understand that we're working toward getting everything very done thoroughly. But when we're using verbiage as like project and design, that makes me very uncomfortable. We've heard other things in the past about kind of having sites, making it more of a, little project inspired on area to make it more of a tourist attraction from site clean area. And I just feel like that's, I guess, thinking outside years to be on. But I think it's important to look back at what was already done, reflect on that. I think it's getting the backlash that is.
Are there any other public comments? Okay. We'll move on then to item 8. Humboldt County Sheriff Law Enforcement Contract Update. The Sheriff Contract Ad Hoc Committee met with representatives of the Sheriff's Office on 2 occasions to discuss the proposed law enforcement increases and to discuss options and opportunities to reduce cost impacts on the city. The Sheriff's Office provided budgetary information for the city to review and provided a cost allocation methodology presentation. The costs were further analyzed by the group and recommendations for further reductions were discussed. At the last meeting with the Sheriff Administration, a new proposal was circulated. The new cost proposal proposes a yearly base contract of $190,684.85. So that's down considerably from the original
Woohoo.
315,000. The proposal is based upon a per capita cost allocation attributed to various cost centers associated with the ongoing provision of law enforcement services. The ad hoc committee, which consisted of myself and Councilperson McKay and staff member manager Maker, has reviewed the proposal and is satisfied that the new proposal represents a cost allocation methodology that is reasonable and justifiable. The ad hoc committee is also committed to applying for a 1-year funding gap grant request to the Measure Z Commission. This application was prepared by the city manager and was submitted by the funding deadline. Next steps will be presenting a formal contract proposal to the council for review and consideration. The sheriff will then present the contract proposal to the county board of supervisors for their consideration. The city is requesting that the cost increase start in fiscal year 24-25 due to timing of the submission of a final proposal. The sheriff is requesting that the cost increase be backdated to the start of fiscal year 23-24. And I don't really think there's anything more to really report.
No, and I wasn't sure
Good
how
news.
far we had gotten into this the last time, so I just wanted to bring it back to kind of keep it on the radar that that the Measure Z application was submitted.
Good.
And I was notified by Regina from the sheriff's department that that the sheriff would be packaging the proposal, the contract, to take that to the board of supervisors for consideration. Um, and I think it'll be very important um, for representatives from the city to be at that meeting when that takes place, just to talk about our concerns. And I think we need to stand firm that this be implemented for 24-25. By the time this does reach the board of supervisors, we're going to be in budgets at that point. The county's already started budgets, and so to take a cost and try and bring it back to, at that point, we're almost going to be a prior year budget. Makes it really tough on both entities. I think it would make it, difficult on both ends for the city and the county as well. So I'm hoping that that will that can resolve itself, and that I think it's a reasonable thing to ask. This has been a long negotiation. It's been, a tough road, honestly. But I think we're at a really good place now. I think we worked really well with the sheriff's staff. Regina and Captain Quinnell were really great to work with, and the ad hoc committee did a really good job meeting with them and, asking really good questions and working with them to develop a cost methodology that I think can be carried forward into subsequent years and subsequent negotiations. So I'm really happy with where we're ending up. Obviously, any increase is tough, but going from 315,000, that was that was a pretty frontal process to now, 190, where we actually have numbers to look at, and I feel like they are reasonable, and it makes it very clear to look at future increases. I think we've landed in a really good position, and I feel like we have a really good rapport with the sheriff's department at this point, and I'm excited that we can move it forward and kind of get this behind us, hopefully.
Yeah, so do let us know when
Yeah.
it's coming up in front of the Board of Supervisors, because
Yeah,
I would definitely like to be
Yeah.
involved, and I'm sure there will be others
absolutely.
that can maybe make
And
adjustments to their
probably too, when the Measure Z
schedule.
applications come forward, being able to speak to that application that the city's made, just, the intent of Measure Z isn't to, provide, a forever funding gap. The way we wrote the proposal was basically, we're asking for a single year funding gap to allow us a year to continue to build our capacity to attract additional sales tax revenues and things and adjust our budgets to be able to manage this increase. And really, I see it as leveraging, a small amount of Measure Z funds, leveraging that with, the city's contract to be able to provide deputy services in the greater area as well as the city of Blue Lake. So in that respect, partnering, because we know that we don't have dedicated service. So those deputies that we're supporting with our contract are providing services into a larger county response area, which is a benefit to everyone. So I think it's a good application. We asked for $35,000. I think that's a small thing to ask. The city collects Measure Z sales tax. We are all also consumers, and purchase items that trigger Measure Z sales tax. So I think, providing a little bit to Blue Lake to help us get through this first year to set us up for secondary budget years is a reasonable ask.
So the application to Measure Z, is that a public forum where you can approach them?
Yeah,
Like we
so
did
they have a
several years
Measure Z,
ago with Humboldt
yeah, they have
Area
the Measure
Foundation.
Z committee who kind of takes the first shot, does a lot of the legwork, reviewing the applications, not interviewing, but asking representatives to come and speak to their application. A lot of times they'll ask you, can you get your application down a bit? Because there's always a bigger ask than there is money. And so, for the city, I felt like we asked for a very reasonable amount. And honestly, anything that came our way would be great. We would be appreciative of that. So I think it's an easy yes for the Measure Z. And it also, I've always really felt like the Measure Z funding should be kind of a prorated allocation anyways, because it's very hard, when we have this big large sum of money and everyone's fighting for a piece of it. It doesn't really allow you the capacity to leverage it or use it or count on it for future years. And so it puts you in a really precarious position. If they did even a population allocation or something and said, Eureka knows are getting this, Arcata knows, that allows you to really do a lot with that funding source. That allows you to, you can use it for matching funds, especially something like that where it's not tied to state or federal dollars, to have a funding source that can be leveraged or in a grant or whatever. Is really beneficial. It's not the prettiest process. I've been through it several times, and it gets really mean, honestly. And
Really?
it's not because everyone's fighting
Yeah,
for
I definitely
something.
Like a
want to be
yard
there
sale.
then.
It's like it can be cutthroat, and I don't really look forward to having to go up there and do it. But
Well, that's why more of us should be with you.
yeah, yeah.
And so let us
And
know.
I think the Measure Z committee, I mean, they're great. They put a lot of time and effort into doing this. It's a hard process. People are
Yeah.
asking for things because they're really important. You're talking about ambulance service and, dispatch and all these things that are really critical. So they have a hard job. And then it goes to the Board of Supervisors for a final kind of ratification allocation designation. So
Okay.
but our contract will be going to the Board of Supervisors as well. So that was one of the things that was brought up. It was just the authority to increase our contract, and that was something that uh, was kind of prefaced by the Board of Supervisors. They had taken an action that restricted the capacity to increase the contract beyond a certain point. And so that was something that wasn't necessarily known at the time. That's now known now. So the sheriff will be taking care of that. And that'll be part of also presenting a new contract. So once we have that contract, we'll have it reviewed by our council. It'll come back to city council for consideration and review. And then, we'll be able to say, yes, this is okay. Then it'll be presented to the Board of Supervisors. And at that point, the Board of Supervisors can also ask for concessions or make changes as well, because we're technically contracting with the Board of Supervisors,
Right.
and the sheriff is a party to that contract. So there's a lot of influence from the supervisors as well.
So is this contract on the table, is this a new contract or this is just an extension or the completion of the existing contract?
So we're proposing a new contract. I think the base contract is fine, but there are areas of the existing contract that both parties agreed needed to be cleaned up. The new cost methodology needs to be part of that contract, and there needs to be some parameters within that contract so that we don't get in a place like we have been. That's the way the previous contract was written. We all realized that there are a lot of gaps and a lot of language that needs to be cleaned up and reassessed, and probably some new language inserted. So that's something that the county council is looking at to resolve that. They'll send us a draft so that we can then review that as well and give our comments. So then we have a consensus document that we take forward for the supervisors to look at.
Okay. So the supervisors, you had mentioned that the contract, that the sheriff was not authorized to increase the cost, and that information came from the county administrative officer. And I did reach out to her and ask for clarity on that issue, and she told me that that wasn't exactly accurate, that the sheriff could increase that.
He can recomputate the costs and make a cost proposal. But under the action that the County Board of Supervisors took, they put a cap on the amount that he could propose to increase. And the cost increases that he was proposing were well beyond that authority. And so actually any increase to our contract, if he was to stay within the parameters, honestly, he would have to decrease our contract amount to stay within the authorities granted to him by the Board of Supervisors. So it was basically, you have 31, I think it was 31 months and 4 weeks or something of contract time. And within that time, you can increase the contract, but the total payable contract could not go beyond 327,000. So our contract started out at 122, it went to 145. The cost proposal that he submitted for 315 was obviously well beyond 327 total payable. So that's where the
Right.
problem lied.
Well, it seems like that was a math problem on the front end, because he wouldn't have been able to even
I don't think he knew.
do 3 years with that piece in there.
At 122.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
no one gets an open-ended contracting authority. I mean, the council doesn't ever give me the authority to just go out and pay for whatever I want or have a contract. You give me authority to authorize the city manager to execute a contract in an amount not to exceed a certain amount. So, and that's what those supervisors did, which is, I mean, that's just well within their rights and logical, that you don't give an open-ended authority when it comes to contracting. So it's not a problem. It just needs to be brought back. And, at that point, it's a good time to also look at the contracting language as well, which is where we're at this point. But there's a box to stay within, and the original demand for the 315 was outside that box. But I think everyone understands that now, and we're all moving past that and revising the contract, which is great. Like I said, working in an actual cost methodology, which is something we had asked for. We wanted to see where the numbers came from and where those costs, what were we paying for, and what was that allocation process, so that we had something to look at, so that we could feel good that we were paying for something that of value that we were actually receiving. And so I think we're at that point. And we we were able to find, honestly, over $6 million in costs in their original proposal that were able to be taken out because we were able to sit down and look at those numbers with them. And so I think that's great. It's where we asked to be from day one. And so we're there. We have a good working relationship with the staff that was dedicated to the process. And I'm really thankful that they were there and were willing to take these steps. And I think it's good for the city.
Yeah.
So,
As I said before, we went line by line
Mhm.
over every cost, and that's when the adjustments started to
Mhm.
happen. And it was a good negotiation. It was done in very good faith and very respectfully. And it turned out well for us. So,
My understanding is that the majority of the reduction is because of Measure Z, that all the Measure Z funding was pulled out of the model.
as it should be, you
Mhm.
can't double dip. You can't charge us for costs that you're getting from someplace else. And
I
so that was
understand,
brought to their attention.
but I'm also my concern. I'm a little bothered by this idea that we want to make this this new cost effective, not retroactively, but for next year,
Why would you want the city to pay retroactive?
because I think that
It's not to
it's
our benefit.
fair. I think that it's fair to the sheriff that we pay to the sheriff's department. You think that's funny?
No,
I
I don't
I
understand.
don't think that makes good fiscal sense.
I think it makes good relationship sense.
We have a
Because
good
Well, the
relationship.
relationship was great. We
Yeah.
were all in a room together, and
Yeah.
that was not an issue with
No.
the relationship.
Right,
There was
right.
no
It's very
contention
respectful
at
and
all.
That's
So,
excellent to hear.
yeah.
Um, but I no, I feel like we call the sheriff's department our partner, and I feel like that it would be fair and appropriate to where they're able to show us that this is what it's costing them to provide the service to the city. I think it's fair and reasonable that we pay that for this year. You don't think that's fair?
no,
Okay.
I do not.
Not-
All right. I think since this is really just an update, I can ask for public input if there is any public input on this. Mr. Sawatsky.
Having attended a majority of the first Measure Z meetings for about 3 years in their entirety and still keeping track of what's going on there, the latitude the county has that's not already encumbered by long-term employee costs and raises in employee costs is just about non-existent. In fact, I think the ex-mayor from Fortuna got up there. She goes, "Why am I here?" She says there's no decisions to be made. It's basically already put set. So if you track this and watch the meetings and watch the supervisor's meeting and watch the Measure Z, it's all on Channel 10. You can go back and see exactly what transpires there. Uh, I find it very interesting that now, since we've gone ahead and we've got the benefit of not having Measure Z funds come out against us, but now we're trying to double dip into it ourselves by asking for money out of the fund when we've already been relieved from that particular part. Do I think there's a very good chance of you receiving that? I wouldn't count on it. From what I've seen, you've got major entities such as the city of Eureka. All the what do we put in there? We put in 1% or 1.5% of the total sales tax goes to Blue Lake. It's just about non-existent. And so when you look if you look at somebody coming out their handout, where what Eureka puts in at least 32%, I think, and these other entities make up quite a bit of the rest, they're going to have their hands out. They've been cut way back. They're probably getting 10 cents on the dollar what they used to get 5 years ago from Measure Z. So they're not happy, and you're gonna go. We'll see how it goes. It'll be an interesting one for me to watch and observe, and probably participate in. Thank you.
And Julie on Zoom.
I just want to thank council for keeping this a continued discussion. I know we're still June, it's been a long running discussion. I appreciate having your act talking, communicating with the sheriff's department. But I also have to concur with Councilman Stefani with, the fact that we do technically owe the sheriff's department money at some point, right?
Don't.
We have another amount due. Not sure. He has taken, he's every little bit he likes to. But I just feel that we were asked at the beginning of our budgeting season to be prepared for this. but you guys were prepared for your battle instead. So I hope, you win it, so that you're not being able to fulfill.
Okay, back to council for any further discussion.
I got a quick question for Mandy, and that is when was the Measure Z applications? What was the deadline for that?
It was Friday.
Just this last week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further discussion on that, we'll move on to item 9. This is the formation of an ad hoc committee to conduct the city manager annual performance evaluation. And to give you a little background, in order to conduct the city manager's annual performance evaluation, the council routinely establishes an ad hoc committee. And that means a committee that's there just for a specific purpose and not for a long-term reason to conduct the review work, including interviews and documentation compilation. The ad hoc presents their information for the council to review, and the council as a whole provides a final performance evaluation. So tonight, I'm recommending that we appoint 2 members of the council to the ad hoc committee and direct them to complete the necessary interviews and document compilation. And I have the reviews that each council person needs to fill out, but unfortunately, I don't have a clean copy of one. Were you able to find one,
I haven't yet,
Mandy?
but
Okay.
if you show me what you
Yeah,
have,
I
then
know I
we
should have
can
brought
see
it.
if we can find the same
Okay, I'll
documents.
come by and bring it to you and show you what I have. Um,
Can you tell us a little bit more about the interview portion of this? What does that mean exactly? Who's being interviewed?
well, actually, that the order is a little different, really. First, everyone fills out an evaluation form, all the council persons,
Okay.
and I compile them with the other ad hoc committee member, whoever that is, and then from that, it's a rated evaluation too. 0 to 5 or something like that. I can't remember. It's been a year. And then we compile all the information, and then there's also areas where people can make comments. And then we form sort of a narrative, and I think there were 5 domains of the city manager's job. Um, and so we compile all that information into a narrative, and then what the narrative is what we present to Mandy in closed session as her evaluation piece that goes into her personnel file. And she never actually sees the specific evaluation forms.
So
What
that's
she'll get is the compilation and the narrative.
okay.
And
So all the information that goes into those evaluations comes from each council,
yeah. Hmm.
and there's
Yeah.
no other parts. Do the council members gather information from anywhere else? Other city? I mean, I know in some situations, like city staff would fill out a survey of a sort, and then that would go back to the evaluators.
Yeah, we did that once years ago, but the last few we haven't done that. So it's primarily just the council evaluations. Yeah. Anyway, I would like to be on
I
the ad
could
hoc
be on the
committee.
ad hoc committee.
Okay,
I
sounds
could
good.
also be on that committee.
Well, this is something we're going to have to do by motion and second. Um, anyway,
Do we have to motion for each person on the ad hoc committee?
no, you can say Adeline Jones, whoever
Okay.
is the second person, you nominate them to
Do
be on
you
the ad
have
hoc
to be
committee.
on the ad hoc committee, or can you just get the information and compile a narrative?
Well,
I don't know,
there's 2
as
people.
mayor, right? I know, but
Two
what
Oh,
people.
my question is,
Yeah.
is the mayor required to be on the ad hoc committee?
No, not necessarily, but it's pretty traditional that the mayor is on that committee. It's been the
Well, it might.
tradition.
I motion that Elizabeth McKay and Elise Scafani are on the ad hoc committee.
I'll second that.
Do we have to open it up to public?
Yeah, I would like to. I was kind of hoping to do that before before we had a motion, but that's okay. We can do that. Is there any further discussion from council? Okay. Is there any discussion from audience? Julie
Julie's there too.
and then Kent.
I support the motion, thank you.
Okay. And Kent.
I support the motion, but I would raise another question. Uh, you folks up here don't deal with a city manager on a day-by-day basis. And in most HR departments, the rating comes from the people that are the staff people. And you take your key staff people, maybe 3 or 4 of them that represent different departments, like maybe Glenn from Public Works and maybe someone else from the Only or somebody else from the staff people, and maybe one other person if you have another department of possibly. And those people also rate, and that's kind of important to get your employees' feedback because that's what your managerial skill set is based upon. That's basic management class 103 when you're doing any kind of evaluation of someone. You want to get the boots on the ground people to have some input. Otherwise, they feel like they're totally being left out of the process, and that's not good management either. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Is there any other public comment on this? Okay, back to council for the discussion. It has been brought up that the staff can also be a part of this evaluation. If
I think that seems
great.
reasonable.
Yeah,
I think we
okay.
could find a really good
great idea.
comprehensive evaluation that we could use.
form,
Mhm.
Hmm
okay. And you would
I think I've
recommend,
already found one, actually. If I could re-find it,
yeah.
would be great.
I know where mine is, but like I said, they're not clean copies. I don't think I have a
Mhm.
clean copy of the last one we used.
I'll look for the one that I had before, or just find it that there's so many things available these days.
Mhm.
Pretty
So
straightforward.
there's a motion and a second. Was there a second?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion by Christopher Edgar to have Elise Scafani and Elizabeth McKay on the ad hoc committee. Is there further discussion? Okay,
And you second?
At least seconded.
Oh, at least did.
Can't
Okay.
you second that?
I
can
don't
second
know.
it.
Yeah.
no, she could.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you're on it.
Right.
Okay, so we need to take a vote. All of in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Yep.
So, should we talk any more about,
You and I will talk.
okay,
We're
yep,
on an ad hoc committee together.
Yeah,
okay.
it's
Okay.
up to
Hammer
you
out
guys.
other
We'll move on.
details. We can decide
Yep.
whatever.
Okay,
Okay,
right.
perfect.
Okay, we'll move on to item 10, council correspondence. We have something here that was brought to our attention, but this is an attached message. The City of Blue Lake Mail can't verify the authenticity of the attached message. Dear Adeline Jones, Mayor of Blue Lake, California, to say I am disgusted by the behavior of the Blue Lake City Manager would be an understatement. Never before have I seen such aggression and disrespect towards a member of the public. This woman not only attacked a member of the public with her words and tone, but she needlessly escalated the situation and flat out lied to law enforcement officers when they arrived on the scene. The behavior of the other city employees was equally abhorrent, and I was concerned for my friend's safety when the gray haired man yelled and motioned violently and aggressively. The blame for this egregious behavior falls directly on the city manager because staff are only following her example. She needs to be fired immediately, and the entire staff should undergo extensive training on how to treat the public. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Lori Sims. Received on February
So
27th,
who brought this?
2024.
I received a public record request regarding, I have probably 120 of those, and I brought in one student in part. Let's comments from me.
Yeah, we all received a million of these things.
And I'll receive this one too.
Well, the city has now put up signs in the room to keep people out because evidently the perpetrator who did this, was, well, if you watched the video, yeah, yeah. So,
It was edited for one
yes,
thing, very
and
carefully. And
the way they were dressed, it was very odd. They were completely in black with a hat and a mask. No, I've been taught to use the word they because I don't know what their pronoun is. Okay. So that's how I speak now.
Talking back and forth.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that.
Is
So-
there any other correspondence?
What signs are you talking about?
Oh, the
Go to
sign-
City Hall. They're there.
There's new signs
Mm-hmm.
to keep people out of City Hall or out of somewhere else?
There's employees only.
Okay.
Where sensitive information is kept.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. I didn't know that.
okay.
Gotta go to City Hall.
Consent.
me?
I
What was
said you
that?
got to go to City Hall.
I did
and
go to
see
City
it.
Hall. I did
Oh,
not
you
notice
didn't
that.
notice? Okay.
Sure, happy there. All right, consent agenda item 11. Is there anyone that would like to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Let's pull everything. There's a lot of stuff in here. And there's a full, wait a minute, sorry. There's a full financial report. Oh, that's
That's not
on
part
the
of the
parts.
consent
Okay.
agenda. That's separate.
okay.
So is this the
The minutes
The
and
minute.
the warrants.
yeah, I mean it's like there's a name but there's nothing written. Was there a comment or no comment? I don't know. I'm guessing there was a comment. So
What, well, all right,
think
let's
we should
go
pull stuff.
pull it. Okay, let's go by, let's go with the first, excuse me, consent item, which is the meeting of November 28th, 2023.
Do we need to?
okay.
Are you pulling all of the consent items?
Apparently we are.
Okay. Do we have who's pulling those?
Do we need to
Well,
make
do
a
we need a
motion
motion to do that?
I'll make a motion that we
so.
separate all the items on the consent agenda. Second?
We make a motion?
I don't think we
I don't
did.
think so.
I don't think we have.
Normally you do.
Oh, we do. Okay, I'll
No.
second it.
All right. Motion made by Elise Scafani, seconded by Elizabeth McKay to pull all items from the consent agenda.
Should have had a nap.
Any further discussion? Public?
I guess
Kent?
I get to learn to pull the chant. How much your register? Is that something you're referring to? That's on the
Yes.
okay, let's try it. While you're cleaning up that.
Yeah, warrants and disbursements is one of the items.
All right, back to council for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Okay then.
All right, let's move on to, first of all, November 28th, 2023, regular meeting.
Page 4, public comment. I see Kent Swatsky's name, but I do not see any comment.
There should probably be something
What
there.
date was that? Sure.
It's
It's
page
page
4
4 in
of the 28th.
28 in November of 28. Wow.
Yeah, it's a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So
we should
let's
probably put
comment
that in
on
there was just nothing there.
power lease.
Public comment.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, the item.
So
I
how
don't
would we
know.
like to recommend that or remedy that?
I believe it's a typo. I can look back through.
Oh,
It's public comment. He probably had a comment. It was just something didn't happen.
And sometimes we don't capture everything, depending on our notes.
oh,
I can look back at mine and see.
it was on the Blue Lake Power lease agreement update. I mean, the other
Well,
way to do
confirmation,
this is to just list the people that make comments. You don't have to list what specifically they say. Because motions and seconds. are
Looks like
people
public comment is missing altogether there because when you go to number 7, which begins on the previous page, and then we go into council comments, and then more council comments below. So it looks like public comment is missing. So there must, I'm guessing there might have been more than just Kent who made a public comment in that meeting.
So
Um,
what happens sometimes is sometimes people interject at certain points, and when Annalie's taking notes, she might write down someone's name, but it's not necessarily a public comment. Like someone came to the podium, it can be an interjection of a statement, or it goes back and forth. And we sometimes those conversations happen very fast, and we can't completely capture them. So
okay.
it could be that she had in her notes that there was a statement made, but maybe didn't capture it at that point because it didn't come up as an official public comment to the podium. And we're not required necessarily to capture all of those.
Right,
And
but
sometimes it just happens fast. So
but there's no public comment for this item.
what
There's
was
just
item
that
number?
word and then one name, so it makes me think that there might be something missing. That the actual public comment for that item didn't get it in.
Kind of rare that we don't
I
have
don't
public
even
comment.
I don't even have it in my meeting minutes.
Where we got it now?
Okay, well, since we don't have I don't think this one was taped.
I think it was.
Oh, okay, well, maybe go back and look at
Okay.
it. Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, thank you.
Tuesday, November 28th,
Sorry.
2023.
And other than that item, is there something else
Editing. I like to edit.
on this?
Okay, so we're
on
going
this one?
page by page. 4, anything on 5, 6,
4, I would like to amend something I saw here.
back on page 4 of that, right?
Number 8, my comment says state the contract amount is basically extortion. I was saying that what they were doing with the contract was extortion, not the amount.
Mm.
It was exorbitant, but not extortion.
So get rid of the word amount.
Yeah.
If you strike that word.
Okay. All right. Item, page 5. Page 6, jump in when you want to make a comment. Page 7, and that's November 28th. So we can pass November 28th with that
Motion that we pass
correction.
November 28th.
Second.
All right, motion made to pass the minutes of the regular meeting of November 28th, 2023 with those corrections and additions.
Well, how can we correct it if it's going to go back? If she's going to go back and review to see what's missing.
We're
what's
moving
missing.
that they correct it.
Yeah,
So,
it's going to be correct.
so we don't have to look at it again
Oh,
after
you could.
those corrections are done.
You could, they're a matter of public records.
Well, when something is missing and we don't know what is missing or what's going to be added, it seems that we
Usually
should
they
look
bring
at
it
it
back,
again.
right? You're going to correct it and bring it back, correct?
You can.
Yeah. So that seems appropriate to me, just that we would see, because typically when we make corrections,
But I don't have 7.
we're asking for specific things.
Yeah, they moved a lot of items.
Okay, so we're not going to pass the meeting record of November 28th until we see it. Is this what we're now deciding? There has been a motion. and a second.
I
See what I'm
you're
saying?
Yes.
That seems appropriate since there's something missing and we don't know how big or small that something missing might be or what it might contain. So it seems to me that we should see it before we accept it.
Well, it's up to the motioner and the seconder whether that is agreeable to them. Because we already have a motion and a second on the floor.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm gonna retract my motion. You can make your own. For
Okay,
what you want to be done.
so the motioner is retracting his motion and the
Sure, I
seconder
can
is retracting her
can-
second.
mhm.
Okay. So the regular meeting schedule will come back for November 28th. Right, we're now on December 19th, 2023. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Stop me when I want anything. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. Can we have a
I,
motion
I,
to
I
accept
move that we accept these minutes as they are.
We'll just make a note.
of November,
Second
December
that
20?
motion.
Okay, motion made
the
by
statement.
Elizabeth McKay,
Wait a
seconded
minute.
by Christopher
Sorry,
Edgar.
sorry. Could we
Uh-oh.
hold on for a second? I have a
Mhm.
note here. I just have to make sure I'm.
Motion made by Elizabeth McKay, seconded by Christopher Edgar to accept the minutes of the December 19th, 2023 meeting.
Fine.
Any further discussion? Public? Back to council. Oh, Julie? Do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused because of the last time when we were discussing the minutes, I asked to run my comments for that, and she's saying, I shouldn't that, yet you're actually following procedure tonight. I would also like, council, and I was like, yeah, I'm just starting here with that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't remove, it's public information. Any comments that are made during public comment are therefore public record, and we cannot remove those comments.
Okay, there's been a motion.
Comments, they weren't what I said, sorry.
Oh, well, then
That's
you
not what
could
you asked.
request those removed if you have the agenda. I mean, when you come up with the, on the portion that we're at, you tell us which ones what need to be changed.
She'd have asked for it to be redacted,
Oh.
not that she was changing anything.
Oh,
But
gotcha.
they were public comments that were made.
Yeah, you can't remove those.
And I'm noticing that exact, I'm not sure that this needs to be in here.
What page are you
On page 7, under,
Of December
under item
19th?
11. So here is a synopsis of what I said about a previous, minutes packet. But I don't understand. It was talking about changing something to minutes somewhere else.
To approve September meeting minutes with corrections? That's item 11. Is that what you're talking about? On page 7?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't understand. I mean, so the September meeting minutes should have been corrected to include these statements, but I don't understand why these statements are in these minutes.
Because that's
That's
when
what
we
you
approved
said.
it. That's when we approved the minutes.
Okay. But were they also changed in the minutes for September?
Well, corrections. These
We make the
corrections were made.
corrections and then save the final with the
Okay.
corrections.
So you whatever we asked to be corrected is noted
Mm-hmm.
in the consent item and then
Yes.
corrected in the previous minutes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, motion made, seconded. All those in favor of approving Tuesday, December 19th, 2023 minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Tuesday, January 16th, 2024 was a special meeting. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of January 16th, 2024 as delivered.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion made by Elizabeth McKay, seconded by Elise Scafani to approve the Blue Lake City Council minutes of January 26th, or 16th. Sorry, 16th, 2024. All those in, any further discussion? Public? Back to council for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes. We're on the warrants and disbursements. Indicate the check number that you're concerned about or questioning, and that will be explained to you.
I still would like to have more information about um, the invoices coming from SHN because it seems like um, a lot of our expenditures to SHN have invoice numbers, but we don't know what they're going to. Like on January 2nd, we have an invoice for the library, which is great. We know that, and then we have one for the truck route, and then we have one that has no identifying um, information. So, and that's a total of over $26,000 there. So, it seems like we should have a little more information coming along with those invoices if we
Well,
can have it.
it's their billable hours.
And I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure
Right,
you can go
but
look those up if you want all the information about them.
Mm-hmm.
well, it seems I don't I don't need to go through every invoice, but I'd like to know what they're for. So I suppose maybe um I mean, I don't know if it's engineering, if it's planning, if it's general city business, if it's identified for a particular project, um, that kind of thing. I mean, for the larger expenditures. And I guess I'm also curious too how we budget for some of those expenses.
We
Um,
contract with our city engineer.
I
So we
understand, but
contract
do
with
we,
them, and then they hand in their billable hours. That's how
right,
contracts work.
but we budget a certain amount.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. And then
And
all grants are accepted by the city. And if those include engineering and contracting, those are added through amendments.
mhm, okay.
Mm.
I have a question. On 11560 and 11561, there's no amounts listed for those. Is that like a placeholder or something?
Those are check numbers on also with the date of 1/2.
Do you want to let them know?
So there were two checks that were written to State Water Resource Control Board on January 2nd, 2024, both in the amount of 2,509. One was for the Powers Creek Footbridge annual permit fee. One was for the Annie Mary Trail project annual permit fee. So two initial checks were voided as they were
Got
issued to the wrong vendor.
Got it.
Oh,
That makes sense.
very good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hmm. So maybe that should be noted when it's a void or something like that, so we know. Okay, other questions about warrants and disbursements? Entertain a motion to pass or accept our warrants and disbursements.
Public comment.
Let's go public.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to remark on this? Kent Sawatsky.
Angela, I took a little time to go over this from an accountant's perspective, and those were two of the highlights. I think there's a third check in there. So I just, a notation, voided check, that would be appropriate. That otherwise people would say that would be leading to potential having checks that you're not having your checks and balances system. And who knows, you're writing a check and could be cleared. Some of these questions, maybe questions or comments, if you have a staff person that you could say could answer them rather than us going through them, because there were quite a few of them here. Did want to make note that the total for SHN engineering, and this is why I believe Elise Scafani's question is correct to know where these are going, because 25% of your budget from these disbursements went to SHN this period. And when you have large sums like that, and some of them you're putting things on, the other ones you're not, that always you set precedent basically. And as far as clarity goes, they should also be, especially large sums. You had another one in here, and it was an annual membership for Liebert, Cassidy, and Whitmire. Or I assume it's legal because that's what the firm does. And and that was an interesting one there. You also had, so the question got answered there. Oh, the question was answered why we had two checks for the exact same amount. Those were the two voided checks for $2,509. Appreciate that getting answered at one time. You had all the SH. We have checks going, and this appears to be just so you know, when you go through this check register, you'll see out of sequence checks. You come down to below check 11573. You have two checks of 2354 and 2355 appears to be a different account. But anytime you have a separate account like that, which is great, I'm glad to see you do have a separate account to make those transactions. It's just always interesting when you're making a check from yourself to yourself. I guess that's your accounting technique for that. Water sewer trust for 1,200. Let's see. Trying to find the other one. The other one, we had another check there that had another check for zero in it. If I recall, there were three of them. Here it is. It's 11,631 was also for zero. And I assume that was to Terminex International. Was that also voided out then? Only that would be a question on that one. Is that one voided and resent out or something, or just a... Okay. And then we had a U.S. Corp. And then we had an employee that also happened to have the same name as the last name as the city manager, Charles K. Mager. And so there would be a question whether that is somebody who is a relative. So that's always something you do, checking on things of that nature. So that would be a question for somebody to answer who that particular employee is. And it happened to be for $565.30. So that's a question I had on this. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the questions.
So who is Charles Maker?
He is my 15-year-old nephew who works at summer camp.
Summer camp in the winter. So was that
He works winter
camp?
break camp.
Camp?
Yeah, winter break camp.
Gotcha.
ACES has a program that anytime school is out of session, they provide summer activities for students
Yeah.
in the K-8 system.
Okay.
Okay, if there are any other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to accept the warrants and disbursements.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Angela Shull, seconded by Elizabeth McKay. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Okay, item 12 is our reports of council and staff. We'll start with council and go around the room. So we'll start with you, Christopher. What
My stuff
meeting
was
did you
already
go to?
discussed
What?
about the flood from the safety meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very sauce.
Pretty much everything I had taken notes on, we talked about
Okay, thank you.
on two separate agenda items.
And then and you did not go to any other meetings?
No.
Okay. And then Ms.
We have not had a Parks and Rec meeting, so there's nothing to report there. I did go to an RCEA meeting. Lots of conversation about costs, and PG&E, the PG&E rate increases and cost projections of power. There's quite a bit going on with RCEA. Part of what they do is procurement of power for future, and the mix of power that they buy and contract for from different entities. So we're in the process of going out many years for procurement. And there's quite a lot of financial analysis and projections and reports that are given. So part of what RCA is doing is buying solar power, and that we have a huge project that's going to come online in about 6 months. It's been delayed several times, and so that's kind of exciting that big project is going to start putting power into the grid, and it's going to represent a huge portion of RCEA's power use. So that's
Is that over at the airport?
no.
Oh,
A project at the airport is not big. It's considered a microgrid, and it is enough power to power the airport and the Coast Guard station in the event of a power outage during generation time. But I don't believe there's any battery storage there. So that's a daytime benefit only.
So where's the location of this?
It's in Southern California.
Oh,
It's a huge solar farm.
oh,
And they ran into
I
lots of
thought it was
problems.
local.
No, we don't have. We have a local. We've contracted with a company that's building a battery storage facility on Foster Avenue at the old mill site, and so that's going to be part of RCEA's mix in the future. But that's 2 or 3 years out, I believe, before it starts to operate. And so we're just constantly working on new contracts and procurement because all of these contracts have a run date of 7 to 10 years. Occasionally, there's one that goes a little longer, um, but there's lots of regulations from the state and the CPUC to have certain quantities of power um, for many years in the future. So that's what we talk about a lot.
Yeah,
It's very exciting.
energy.
Yes. And I did get an email from Andy, the our web hoster designer, um, and he's about to invoice us, and he's going to invoice us at the beginning of March, and he might have already sent that out for our annual hosting fee. And he asked, we're coming to the end of our 6 month. We said that we would contract with him for 4 hours a month for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming to the end of that. And I believe he's used every minute of that 4 hours each month to work on our website to continue to update parts that were not covered um, in the original update, and to solve various problems that have cropped up here and there. So he asked me if we would like to continue that, and if so, he was going to put that on the annual invoice. So that's a question for council, if we want to continue that. And I would recommend that we do because I think we've gotten our more than our money's worth. We've
So is that a future agenda item?
Future agenda
Yeah.
item.
We can't make
We can't do
make
that right now. It's
decisions
not
on
on the agenda.
non-agendized items,
Mhm.
but maybe
Okay.
that should be for a future agenda
Okay.
item.
So we'll
For
put
sure.
that on for next month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you have anything else, Elise?
Nope.
Okay, so I went to a uh, Humboldt Waste Management Authority meeting on February 8th, and we approved a proclamation recognizing Jill Duffy for her years of service, and she was there, and it was really great. She's done a lot for the HWMA in the past. And then we received a preliminary timeline and pathway for the in-county organics processing plant, and this is again in response to SB 1383, which is the restaurant waste, and we're not yet ready to send out a request for proposals, but we're getting pretty close to that. And then I attended the Economic Development Commission meeting for Elizabeth McKay because she was out of town and I'm
Thank you
her
very much.
alternate. And I don't want to know where. Anyway, good meeting. We got an update of the sheriff's contract, which you heard this evening as well. We talked about the Blue Lake branding and signage project. Some of the spring events that are going to be held, like the karaoke and um, fundraising for a bike park, for the bike park. We got a report from the Town Square construction project, and the bathroom bid came in very expensive, so we may have to look at that. Um, and then the Blue Lake Park development is coming along. Bottlewood Community Project design and review is going to the Planning Commission in April. The northern side of Taylor Way master plan and parcel subdivision, Storyland, that's the subdivision parcels. We're getting an update from them. Powers Creek Restoration Project update, vegetation removal this year. And that was the $963,000 grant we talked about earlier. And then we talked about Parks and Recreation events, schedules, update, and then announcements was the bingo that the chamber was sponsoring on February 17th, which I also attended. and that was at the Grange. Um, and we talked about some of the people's terms that are up, and that has been taken care of this evening. And then the last meeting I went to was Humboldt County Association of Governments, and we got an update on the last chance grade. Their environmental document is being finalized in April to June. There was a meeting in Oric concerning their traffic safety. They're looking at something like Willow Creek, where they put the trees that really calm the traffic going through Willow Creek. Oric is looking at something like that. We approved our 23-24 local transportation fund and our transportation development local apportionment was passed. And our overall work program for 24-25 draft was presented, and it's due to Caltrans by March 1st with the budget. And Beth Burks, who's the head of Humboldt County Association of Governments, she's the CEO. She was leaving for 2 weeks for Nepal. Una was covering for her. That's all I have there. Okay.
Chamber of Commerce. We already talked about the Valentine's bingo. There's also Blue Lake. Sorry, gosh, Chamber of Commerce is also talking about the roundabout sign updates, painting, adding, whatnot. It was just a very brief discussion item. We'll come back to it. Uh, what else? Oh, there's a strong desire for the chamber to do a survey of local businesses. And we discussed some possible survey questions, how to get those out to local businesses in a format that businesses will respond to, like scale. And then a potential calendar of events, including workshops for businesses, roundtables, and then, fun events. Last night was REDEC, and there was a very thorough presentation from Connie Stewart regarding the Redwood Coast Connect program, which is a consortia on broadband development, and she provided some updates. Vero is a company that is being contracted with, and they're doing the $2.99 digital component, which will be done very, very quickly, which has been kind of amazing how quickly they're digging up $2.99 out towards Willow Creek and putting in fiber optics. Then she talked a little bit about out at the Gorda subduction zone. There's underground optics that are being run. Those will actually be run all the way out to Singapore, and talked about the progress on that. There was kind of a fun event where several folks from Arcata and Eureka, NOAA, blah, 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 we're all at Arcata PD, where they do collect data for the underground fiber optics that are there. And Connie was saying that the fiber optics and the technology that's all underground down there is so sensitive that there were 10 of them that went out into the parking lot and jumped up and down for like 10 seconds, and then went back and reviewed the data, and they could actually see the movement and on the earth with these fiber optics. And so an added benefit with having these fiber optics and this very, very sensitive technology is that it could potentially add an increase to earthquakes and tsunami information. So that was just something that they're kind of in the very early stages of. One of the other components, and this is kind of an ask, and I'm not sure how to gather this information unless people want to email me and then I can report back. But so right now, there are for cell phones, there are two main areas where updates happen. So you get an email, right, or you get a notice on your phone, you have to do an update. Those updates get routed either through LA, out off of Wilshire, or up in Seattle. And so we're adding extra anchor institutes is what they're called locally. And so those anchor institutes, the idea behind these anchor institutes is to basically create this continuous wheel of information, so that if, let's say, Mad River Hospital is an anchor institute. They go down, right? There's no disruption to services. And so by increasing the number of anchor institutes, throughout the county, we're talking Humboldt County particularly, Connie's, on a bigger scale, but beyond the traditional libraries and schools and fire departments and city halls, kind of looking a little bit more broadly at where some of those anchor institutes could be to capture that loop so that we keep that flow of service. And so we were kind of talking about it a little bit last night. Riley was there from Blue Lake and Jim from Trinidad. But I was thinking about Blue Lake a little bit and how we have so many trees, right? So where do we put our anchor institutes, or where do we recommend that the broadband consortia add additional anchor institutes? Or would we do it out at, the offices at Green Diamond? Would we add them? And it has to be kind of a place, like a centralized place, so that people could go to said place. And so if there are any thoughts on that, as we kind of just
What are
process
the
this.
requirements of the place?
It just needs to be like a building. A building.
It's
So it couldn't be like a tree on mile marker 17, if that makes sense. So it
doesn't
would
have to have a power requirement.
it would have to have a power
No,
requirement.
like what is the power?
I don't know. I don't know if it's solar or just traditional PG&E. That was not necessarily. I mean, APD has traditional. I mean, some. I guess there's a variety of each, right? Because Mad River Hospital's on solar, but not necessarily.
I was thinking more along the lines of voltage, like how much.
Oh,
Like, is it a construction or not construction, but heavy, like a shop style, or is it just like a homeowner? Yeah.
yeah, that's a good
Amps.
point. I didn't even think about that. I mean, she was talking about like big location, or she was talking about the obvious big locations, but then as we start thinking about, so I mean, I can just if we compile, if you want to email me some ideas, and I can just send them to her as the consortia is developing these additional anchor institutes.
They're
But
looking
it
for a
was really
place in
cool.
Blue Lake.
Like City Hall?
Well, they've already they've already got like the traditional places established: City Hall, the library, schools, hospitals, those kinds of areas, the traditional locations.
Oh.
But in thinking out, like, would we need one at Prash Hall because it's so close to City Hall, right? It's within a mile radius, so is that necessary? Maybe,
Right.
I don't know, right? But maybe the office is out at Green Diamond, right? Or at the tree farm at Green Diamond, something like that is what I was thinking. I know they're in conversations with the Rancheria, so I'm fairly certain that Connie's got, the Rancheria component figured out, but even like Glendale, right? Just some of those kinds of things. Yeah. Anyway, it was kind of a cool discussion, and wow, that underground cable is phenomenal. It is so cool. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. Done and done.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I did not attend any. There were none for me to attend where I was located.
Ken?
But I will be going to the League of Cities on March 8th in Willits. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sad that our older woman, I wanted to look her up while I was there, but
Oh,
she
I think
passed
Edie.
away.
Yeah, Edie died
Edie.
like less than 2 weeks after
What?
her
That's
birthday.
okay.
Yeah.
103-year-old lady.
No, she's 116.
116.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Edie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
The oldest woman in the United States.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And she
Right
spent
there in
all of
Willits.
116 years in
In
Willits.
In
Willett.
Willits. I think she
Yeah.
moved away for a minute, but came right back.
Make it to her 116th
Yes,
birthday?
2 weeks
Oh,
after.
She did. There was a massive parade and
Yeah.
balloons, and
Yeah,
it
I thought
made
I saw
national news. It
Yeah.
was a huge,
Wow,
huge
good for
thing.
her.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Interesting.
And we should
Okay.
all report that we're supposed to be doing some kind of training online, right? Did you
Yeah,
guys
I
already
think
do it?
I completed mine today. I think. I don't know. I'm going to ask you tomorrow if it went through. Okay, we will move on then to managers report. We have the sheriff contract negotiations, which we pretty much have discussed. Park recreation, state park per capita grant, 177,000. Ongoing, majority of the work has been completed. The floor looks good.
Yeah, it's
Is it all
building,
fixed?
so we're gonna have them come back and refinish the other sections.
Turn that on.
Yay. Yay.
Right on. Even with all those little kids running all over.
Oh,
Squeaky
skating
tennis
is-
shoes.
But skating is very hard on a floor.
I went to a basketball game there today. It was really fun and it looked good.
Little basketball game. The Town Square Grant construction project will begin in spring of 2024. Contracting with Sequoia Industries to complete the work. Bike park. I see they've got dirt all
A lot of dirt.
big hills all over the place there. So that looks like it's ongoing and will continue as weather permits.
Can I ask a question before we switch pages?
Yeah.
So you mentioned in your report about the Economic Development Commission that it was the bid for the bathroom for the town square was mentioned. Is there a new bid for a different kind of bathroom? No, so we're just talking about the old I forget what it's called, the old metal bathroom, Portland Loom. Okay.
Okay. Moving on. The library improvements, the library project is at 90% mark. We have all the concrete work, final concrete work to meet ADA standards. Oh, the librarian wants the flower box moved back where it was.
Yeah, so we're waiting for our past report, and I think there's gonna be a section of the concrete that's not gonna meet, their standards, so we're waiting, so we may need to pull a section out, to,
Oh,
to make the ADA standards, so.
so that can't be pushed against
Oh, we
the.
can push it back, yeah.
Push
but
it
there's
back.
still some work being done.
Okay, and then the city infrastructure, the truck route study, design and construction continues on the truck route. The city's projecting a June construction date for the improvements to Greenwood Avenue. As part of the first phase, the city will be replacing the water laterals. We've discussed that in the past.
Has the design review come back yet?
No.
Taylor Way improvements. The city has received a grant from HCOG to hire Dan Burden to complete a street design for Taylor Way. I'd like to see him when he comes. When does he do?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's gonna come up here. We do all of our meetings via Zoom. I
Oh,
think he's
yeah.
up in maybe the Seattle
Yeah, I think
or
he lives in that area.
Angeles area.
Okay. And the design will incorporate speed control measures, a gateway installation, raised crosswalks, on-street parking, turnaround options. The FEMA water tanks funding, the city submitted a funding request to the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Program to replace the city's two Redwood water tanks. The city's received notice. Phase 1 award has been approved. This will fund the design portion of the project. The city is in the process of working with FEMA and Cal OES to finalize the funding agreement. It's ongoing. Our housing element update, staff has completed the final draft, submitted it to the state. The state has received the final submittal and directed the city to pursue adoption. The city planner is working on the environmental review and will be presenting the plan to the Planning Commission and the City Council for review and consideration of adoption. And then staff is working closely with our HCD representatives to address implementation of various initiatives. Having a compliant housing element allows the city to participate in a range of programs and funding opportunities. Should have a big celebration party when the state approves it. It's been so long. Are there any questions or comments from council on the manager's report? Is there anything from public on the manager's report? Julie and then Ken?
I was just, maybe a little bit like comment on the report in general. I'm sorry. You guys are working hard. I'm still over each day. I wanted to go back to Shoal, as just getting back to, her wanting to get more information out of Secret Institute. Like, I think I want to hear more about that. And,
That's great.
and back to, I think that's important for construction. Thank you.
Kent Sawatsky.
So I want to speak on item the FEMA water tanks funding. The request you have for there, and I was in communication. As some of you are aware, we've had people in the area coming to different properties. I have from Cal Fire doing assessments for fire safe. And I mentioned to them we want to make sure that your design work for your tanks does have the maximum protection, fire safe setbacks, such as 100 foot of thing on that. So that most likely will be being addressed. And I think that's an important thing if you're going to have infrastructure, is to protect it to your maximum ability. We don't want to lose our ability to have water storage because we didn't apply for correct fire safe things required by Cal Fire. Thank you.
Did staff want to add anything to the manager's report?
I don't think so. If you don't have any questions.
Okay. We will then move on to future agenda. Oh, the financial report. The financial report. So this is the unaudited financial report of July 1, 2023 to January 31st, 2024. The budget to date percentage is at 58% as of January 31st, 2024. Anything we need to know particularly about the financials?
No, but I can report that our taxes came in.
I heard about that.
So
Good.
that's very helpful. And then we just got approval for a couple of our larger reimbursement requests from the state. That those have been approved and should be hitting the bank soon as well.
Cool part.
And is the tax payment reflected in these numbers?
I don't believe, no, they came in after. Was Scott able to incorporate I don't believe it came. No,
No,
because it was
because this is
February
to-
revenue.
Yeah, this is to January 31st, and they came in after that. So that'll be different. Do you anticipate any budget amendments that will be occurring?
Yeah, so we will have some budget amendments, mostly related to the water project, the laterals.
The project on Greenwood?
Yeah, and
Okay.
then the construction for Greenwood, depending on when that comes forward, we may need a budget amendment to add that funding to the project, to the budget. But yeah, I think Scott is starting to look at presenting an amendment maybe in March or so. He'd like to try and get the budgets started sooner, but it's always, that's always our goal. It seems like we always get it adopted in time, but
Yeah.
it's and it's tax season, so Scott, his firm does a lot of taxes, so he gets pulled a lot off of our stuff for tax season. So, but our goal is to get the budget process started sooner than later.
So I'm looking at page 1, which is the general fund, and just noting the planning budget, and that we've already spent 87% of our budgeted amount for planning. So and I don't see a line for engineering. So I'm curious because SHN is mostly planning and engineering, right?
Mhm.
So how does the engineering show in our budget?
So the planning budget, so we've had several projects that we have some outstanding reimbursements for. So the planning budget is we budget what we anticipate our expenses and revenues will be. But as we bring in more projects, those come in through budget amendments. So although we have higher expenditures in planning, we also have higher reimbursements to balance those. So those we have reimbursements coming through planning for some reimbursements through PG&E, some work that PG&E has been doing, and then we have reimbursements and cost recovery for the Danco project that's ongoing. And then we also have some projects, some grants. So as we bring in different projects through the budget year, we can exceed those expenditures, but we also should be balancing that with exceedance of revenue. So that'll be a budget amendment that Scott brings forward to amend that.
Okay. Do those reimbursements get identified specifically for planning or whatever?
Yes, because they're specific to specific scopes of work. So we'll pull those out. So if it's a construction project and there's aspects of it that are planning and engineering, those go to the planning engineering, and then the construction goes to a construction capital improvement line item.
So do I understand you correctly when you're saying, so all of the engineering is tied to specific projects,
Yes.
so it's not budgeted as engineering?
We have general engineering, so we budget a certain amount for general planning and engineering, but through the course of the year, we bring in additional projects or different projects come to fruition at different times. So
Okay.
like Greenwood, there's a construction aspect, an engineering aspect to the management of the construction project
Right.
that comes in separate, but we've also had grant revenue prior to that for preliminary engineering and design through a portion. So anything that's project related comes through on a project basis. And if it's going towards a capital improvement, then it comes in through a capital improvement fund. General planning and engineering, where we just have an on-call planner. Gary's doing regular office hours the second and fourth Tuesday or Wednesday of the month. Or if he's doing meetings with the planning commission, that's budgeted separately. That's more like staff time.
Mhm.
Same with engineering. Those budgets are usually fairly low. Where the costs really come in is based upon projects.
Mhm. So there
So
is no,
those are grant derivatives.
so should this planning line say planning and engineering?
Engineering.
So that should probably get changed then. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no questions or comments on this item, I'll open it up to public. Is there any public remarks? Kent Sawatsky?
In accounting, when you're looking at things, you look for strange numbers or things that are out of proportion. Then we start doing why questions, such as on your page 1, you have a line item here that is actual year to date as percentage of budget is 490,054%. And that basically is charges for services you budgeted 19,206, and then you have actual to date 94,214. So a relevant question for your staff would be a why question. Why is that one different than what was budgeted? So at least you'll know why. Maybe it's a one-time thing. Maybe it's a recurring thing. Then on the other thing on page 2, you have a cost of interest expenses, which is 347.49. You had budgeted 1,800. You're spending 6,255. Just a guess, that might be the loan on your park property or something, because I did see a rather large disbursement on that one. So anytime you have variances in budgets, if you want to look for it and ask why questions, because I assume you want to know why we're making way more money, or we're making way less, or we're spending more. So highly recommend you ask those questions at some time. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yes. So Julie.
Julie? Julie?
I'm just considering what Kate said. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
back to council for
So
any
can I
questions
ask,
or comments?
can I ask about that charges for services? That's almost 500% of the budget.
Which item?
It is on page 1 under revenues and transfers,
This is page 1.
charges for services.
Oh.
It's about halfway down under county revenues.
So these are cost recovery line items. So these are um, as projects come in, as we they could be permit fees. They could be cost recovery for project review. So as projects come in throughout the year, those numbers change because we do a projected budget, but we don't know what the year is going to bring to us, and um, so that's what would um, would be in that category.
I mean, budgets, let's recall that budgets are just an estimate almost of what your expenses are going to be. And it's a blueprint. It's a way of you going forward, but it oftentimes is not the hard, fast reality of what happens.
It's a living document, like you were
Yeah.
saying.
There you go.
Recovery and loss and payouts and stuff going back.
All right.
It's a, or-
And I would
I
also
understand.
point out that that's revenue. That's not
Right.
expenditures.
Right.
So
And then on
it's
the
going in
next
the right
page,
direction.
the interest expense that Kent pointed out at 347%. Is that the town square mortgage?
But I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Three,
Under
four,
interest expense, we don't, the actual year to date is 0. And the budget's 1,100. Is that what you're looking at?
No, I'm looking at interest expense under expenditures and transfers at 6255 with a budgeted amount of 1,800. So we're over by 4455. It's 347.49% of the budget.
I don't know. I'd have to look and see which project that is. It could be loans, but I'm not sure. It's just a general category, so I'd have to go and look. It could be multiple items.
okay. There are no further questions or comments. This is not an action item. So we'll move on to future agenda items. We have the web design, possible not increase, continuation. Yeah. Okay.
I would like to put that we discuss the idea of allowing retail cannabis in the city of Blue Lake.
we have to amend our
Mhm.
Yeah.
a lot of things because of the cannabis laws that Blue Lake City have.
Yes.
Certain way.
It would
Yes.
be a change from our cannabis law, which we
So just open a
adopted.
discussion item.
I would
Yeah.
like to
I would like-
consider
Yeah.
amending our Blue Lake City law to allow retail cannabis. I would like to put that on the agenda.
that's one thing I'm thinking about bringing up.
Hmm. And then I also want to just actually discuss and have action on labeling the trash cans and recycling around town. I've had people ask about it.
Mm.
And then water in the dog park.
Maybe something temporary. Because we talked about that, how it's really difficult to get water out there. Maybe figure out.
Wouldn't be that difficult. It's digging a ditch.
I have a.
It's at, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Dig a ditch. Get a ditch witch.
No, there's water right there at the little farm. It's not that far. Okay.
The signage that's on the emergency gate. Maybe both of you know this answer. On Hatchery Road, the one that goes out towards the levee. The one that people park in front of all the time. Is that city property or is that
That's county responsibility.
it's county
A
responsibility?
lot of that is private.
Well, no, I'm talking about just the sign itself because there's a sign on the at the gate and basically, I mean, I know it's an emergency gate. You're not supposed to block an emergency gate so that
Right. No
emergency vehicles can get out there, right? And the sign doesn't necessarily say that. It's a little bit vague. And so every time, I'm out there walking and I, furrow my eyebrows and stink eye whoever I think
Park
owns
there?
the car, right? But it doesn't necessarily say it, and I'm just asking because the sign doesn't say, no parking, emergency access only, make it very clear. So if that's not the city, it's the county, then that's a whole other.
Yeah, and the fire chief we both make the same rounds every morning. So
Right.
that's one of our rounds that we go and I turn around at the hatchery and come back. And he routinely tags people's vehicles for parking illegally in there.
I hope he tagged the woman who left her child in the car seat sleeping, which was
Oh,
I did call that one in. That one
that's illegal.
well, parking there in general is illegal.
Yeah, but leaving a
But
child
a
in a
kid in
car.
the car is worse.
But anyway, if it's not a city issue, then it's not an infraction.
So
Yeah,
when you
and I
say
think-
tag, is that an actual you got to pay money kind of ticket?
No, but he gives them
First time's a warning,
basically
yeah.
a warning that the
That you're
vehicle can
blocking
be
an
towed.
emergency access point.
Okay, any other future agenda items for our next meeting, regular meeting, which would be March 26, 2024 at 6:30?
I would
Tuesday.
like to add a moment of silence for Larry Kite.
Yes,
Oh.
please and thank you.
Yes.
Didn't know Larry.
He lives on the corner across from the fire hall.
Larry
Thank you for remembering that.
KIGH.
Posted that
Yes,
last night.
I was
Thank
thinking
you.
about doing it tonight.
Mhm.
I thought about it after the opening statements. I was like, oh shoot.
Yeah, we usually do it right after the flag
Yeah.
salute, so
Yeah.
we can do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn. Too soon.
Second?
Motion made by Angela Schultz,
Mhm,
second by
sorry.
Elizabeth McKay. Any further discussion from council?
Having a meeting.
Anything from public? Back to council.
I believe it's a debt for a draft became put on this meeting. I didn't see it on there. Maybe that was the draft.
Do you remember? Is there something?
Oh, the incident thing
Oh, right.
that wasn't put on the
And
agenda.
and that brings up the what do you call it? The incident was the whatever. I forget the
First
name.
Amendment audit.
Yeah.
It's called the First Amendment Auditor Incident.
Right.
Okay, First Amendment Auditor. All right, well, we can discuss that at the next
And
meeting.
the other thing we should probably discuss briefly is our agenda review committee meetings. We didn't have
Mm.
one this time.
I know, because it was
And-
President's Day.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we didn't etch in stone that they had to happen on Monday. So I think that we need to come up with a way to communicate so that we have an opportunity to have one each month.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Annalie would be willing to be the person that that sends out an email to the 4 people that are involved in that committee, and then so maybe the week before you send out an email and say, hey, our meeting is here. These are when are we going to meet? And so we can set that meeting before it's a holiday, and we all go, oh, it's a holiday, and agenda review committee. Yeah. So if you could do that, then then we'll have an opportunity to set that each month.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.